When Daniel Hayes opened his apartment door at midnight, he expected a neighbor complaining about noise. What he found instead was a terrified woman with rain-soaked hair and trembling hands asking for sugar she clearly didn't need. Within 24 hours, he'd be standing between her and a man who'd tracked her across state lines. Within a week, he'd realized that protecting a stranger would either save 2 broken lives or destroy the fragile world he'd built for his daughter. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is open your door after midnight. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels, and if you're enjoying it, hit that like button. Now let me tell you what happened next. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday night, turning the parking lot of the Riverside Apartments into a mirror of flickering streetlights and shadows. Daniel Hayes stood at his kitchen sink, hands submerged in soapy water, scrubbing the remnants of mac and cheese from a small plastic bowl. The apartment was quiet except for the rhythmic drumming of rain against the windows and the distant hum of traffic on the interstate. He glanced toward the hallway, where a sliver of light escaped from beneath his daughter's bedroom door. Emma had fallen asleep 20 minutes ago, her small hand still clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. She was 7 now, and Daniel had spent every one of those years making sure she felt safe, loved, and protected from the chaos that had defined his own childhood. The knock came just after midnight. It wasn't loud, but it was insistent. 3 measured raps that seemed to carry an urgency the hour itself amplified. Daniel dried his hands on a dish towel, his mechanic's fingers still bearing the faint traces of engine grease that never quite washed away. He wasn't expecting anyone. His brother lived 2 states over, his ex-wife had remarried and moved to Seattle, and his few friends knew better than to show up unannounced after Emma's bedtime. He moved through the small living room, past the couch where he'd fallen asleep more nights than he cared to admit, past the bookshelf filled with Emma's picture books and his collection of vintage car magazines. The peephole showed him a distorted image of someone standing in the hallway, but the fluorescent lighting made it difficult to make out details. Daniel unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. The woman standing in his doorway looked like she'd been running through the storm. Her dark hair clung to her face in wet strands, and her gray hoodie was soaked through at the shoulders. She was maybe 30, with green eyes that darted past him into the apartment before meeting his gaze. Her hands were clasped together in front of her, knuckles white. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's late. I'm Olivia. I moved into 3B last week." She gestured vaguely upward, indicating the apartment directly above his. "I was wondering if you had any sugar I could borrow?" Daniel had been a mechanic long enough to know when something didn't sound right, when the engine knock you heard didn't match the problem you were being told about. This woman, Olivia, wasn't here for sugar. Everything about her posture, her voice, the way her eyes kept flicking toward the stairwell behind her told him she was afraid. "Sugar?" he repeated, keeping his tone neutral. She nodded, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know it's a weird time to ask. I just realized I'm completely out, and I have this thing I need to make for work tomorrow morning, and—" She stopped mid-sentence, her breath catching slightly. "I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. I shouldn't have bothered you." She started to turn away, but Daniel saw her hand trembling as she pushed her wet hair back from her face. Something in that gesture, the way her fingers shook despite her attempt to appear casual, made his decision for him. "I've got sugar," he said. "Come in. You're soaked." Olivia hesitated, her eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether this invitation was genuine or carried some hidden threat of its own. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her because she stepped carefully over the threshold, her sneakers squeaking slightly on the hardwood floor. Daniel closed the door but left it unlocked, a subtle signal that she could leave whenever she wanted. "Let me grab you a towel," he said, moving toward the bathroom. "You're dripping all over my floor." "I'm so sorry," Olivia said again, wrapping her arms around herself. "I didn't mean to—" "It's just water," Daniel interrupted, returning with a faded blue towel. "Floor's seen worse. I've got a 7-year-old. He saw something shift in her expression at that. A flicker of relief, maybe, or recognition. She took the towel and pressed it against her hair, her movements mechanical, like she was going through motions she'd performed 1,000 times without really thinking about them. "Your daughter," Olivia said. "She's asleep?" "Out like a light," Daniel confirmed. He moved toward the kitchen, opening the cabinet where he kept the sugar. "How much do you need?" Olivia trailed off. still standing near the door, the towel now hanging loosely in her hands. The pretense was crumbling, and they both knew it. "I don't actually need sugar." Daniel turned to face her, leaning against the counter. He didn't say anything, just waited. It was something he'd learned from years of dealing with customers at the garage. Sometimes people needed silence to fill with the truth they were afraid to speak. Olivia's composure finally broke. Her shoulders sagged and she sank onto the arm of his couch, the towel falling to her lap. "I heard footsteps in the hallway," she said, her voice hollow. "Heavy footsteps, pacing back and forth outside my door. I looked through the peephole, but whoever it was stayed just out of view. I waited for 20 minutes, but they didn't leave. They just kept pacing, and I couldn't—" She stopped, pressing her palms against her eyes. "I couldn't stay in there alone." Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. "Did you call the police?" "And tell them what?" Olivia dropped her hands, looking at him with eyes that held more resignation than fear. "That I heard footsteps? That someone was standing in a public hallway? They'd tell me the same thing the cops in Sacramento told me when I reported the phone calls. They'd tell me there's nothing they can do until something actually happens." "Sacramento," Daniel said. "That where you're from?" Olivia nodded. "I moved here 3 weeks ago. Thought I could start over, I guess. Put some distance between me and—" She stopped herself again, as if saying the name out loud would somehow summon him. Daniel pulled out one of the kitchen chairs and sat down, maintaining some distance to avoid making her feel cornered. "Between you and who?" For a long moment, Olivia didn't answer. She stared at the towel in her lap, her fingers working at a loose thread. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless. The tone of someone who'd told this story too many times to too many people who hadn't been able to help. "His name is Marcus Reed. We dated for 8 months. I broke up with him 4 months ago, and he hasn't accepted it. He started showing up at my apartment in Sacramento, at my work. He'd send me flowers with notes about how we were meant to be together, how I just needed time to see that. When I blocked his number, he'd call from different phones. When I threatened to get a restraining order, he'd disappear for a week or two, and I'd think maybe it was finally over. Then he'd show up again, like nothing had happened." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen this pattern before. A friend's sister had gone through something similar back in his hometown. "So you moved?" "I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I quit my job, broke my lease, left everything behind except what I could fit in my car." Olivia's laugh was bitter. "I was so careful. I didn't even tell my best friend the city, just that I was heading north. And for 3 weeks, nothing. My phone stayed quiet. I started to think maybe I'd actually done it, maybe I'd actually gotten away." "What changed?" Daniel asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Olivia reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out her phone. Her hands were steadier now, the initial panic giving way to something harder, more controlled. She unlocked the screen and turned it toward him. The text message was time-stamped 3 hours ago. The number was one Daniel didn't recognize, but the message itself was clear enough. "Found you. Nice building. Kind of run down, but I guess it's what you can afford now. We need to talk." Below that, sent an hour later. "I know you're scared. I know you think I'm the bad guy. But I love you, Olivia. I just want to talk. Face to face. Like adults." And then, sent just 15 minutes before she'd knocked on Daniel's door. "I'm outside. Come down, or I'll come up." Daniel set the phone down carefully on the coffee table, as if it were something dangerous. "The footsteps," he said. "I don't know if it was him," Olivia said quickly. "I didn't see anyone. But the timing—" She gestured helplessly at the phone. "And he knows which building. He might not know which apartment yet, but he's narrowing it down," Daniel finished. He stood up, moving to the window and looking out at the parking lot below. The rain was still coming down hard, turning everything into a blur of darkness and reflected light. There were maybe a dozen cars visible, all of them empty as far as he could tell. "What kind of car does he drive?" "A black Audi? A 4, I think." "Why?" "Just checking," Daniel said, though he didn't see anything matching that description in the lot. "Have you eaten anything today?" The question seemed to catch Olivia off guard. "What?" "Food," Daniel said, turning back to face her. "When's the last time you ate something?" She blinked at him, clearly trying to process the shift in conversation. I don't know. Lunch, maybe? I wasn't really hungry." Fear'll do that, Daniel said, moving toward the kitchen. But you need to eat something. Can't think straight on an empty stomach. He opened the refrigerator, scanning its contents. I've got leftover chicken, some pasta, or I can make you a sandwich. Nothing fancy, but it's food. Olivia stared at him like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. You're offering me dinner? At midnight? While my stalker ex-boyfriend is potentially in this building? Well, I'm not sending you back upstairs to an empty apartment while he's out there, Daniel said matter-of-factly. And I'm not much good at solving problems on an empty stomach. Figure the same's probably true for you. He pulled out the container of leftover rotisserie chicken. So, chicken okay? Something in Olivia's expression cracked, not breaking exactly, but softening. You don't even know me, she said quietly. Know enough, Daniel replied, pulling out a plate. You're scared, you're alone, and you needed help badly enough to knock on a stranger's door at midnight with a story about sugar. He started pulling the chicken apart, his movements efficient and practiced. I've got a daughter sleeping in the next room. I'd want someone to help her if she was ever in trouble. Figure that's reason enough. Olivia was quiet for a moment, watching him work. What's her name? Your daughter. Emma, Daniel said, and despite everything, he couldn't help the small smile that crossed his face when he said it. She's 7. Smart as hell and stubborn as her mother, currently obsessed with dinosaurs and refuses to believe that they didn't have feathers. We had a 20-minute argument about it last week. Who won? She did. Kid pulled up pictures on my phone of the latest fossil discoveries and everything. Turns out I was wrong about the feathers. He slid the plate across the counter toward her, along with a fork. You've got kids? Olivia shook her head, picking up the fork but not yet eating. Always thought I would, eventually. Just never found the right... She stopped herself, a shadow passing across her face. Clearly my judgment in partners isn't great. One bad choice doesn't define you, Daniel said. He poured her a glass of water and set it next to the plate. Eat. Then we'll figure out what to do next. Olivia took a tentative bite of the chicken, and Daniel saw some of the tension leave her shoulders. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the quiet clink of fork against plate and the continued drumming of rain against the windows. He wasn't always like this, Olivia said suddenly, setting down her fork. Marcus, I mean. At the beginning, he was charming, thoughtful. He'd remember little things I mentioned, my favorite flower, the coffee shop I liked, the book I'd been wanting to read. He'd show up with surprises. It felt romantic, special. Daniel leaned against the counter, listening. He'd heard variations of this story before. The slow escalation, the way control could be dressed up as care. About 3 months in, things started to shift, Olivia continued. He wanted to know where I was all the time, who I was with. At first, he'd frame it as concern. He just wanted to make sure I was safe, you know? Then it became expectations. I should text him when I got to work, when I left. If I went anywhere after, if I didn't respond fast enough, he'd show up wherever I was just to check on me. And when you pushed back? Daniel asked. He'd get hurt, wounded. Tell me he just loved me so much that the thought of losing me made him anxious. He'd apologize, promise to do better, bring me flowers. Olivia picked up her water glass, staring into it. The thing is, I work in marketing. I spend my days analyzing behavior patterns, understanding what makes people tick. I should have seen it. I should have known what was happening. It's different when you're in it, Daniel said quietly. When someone's telling you they love you, that they just want to keep you safe, it's hard to see the cage they're building around you. Olivia looked up at him, surprise evident in her expression. You sound like you know something about it. My ex-wife's second husband, Daniel said, the words coming out more easily than he'd expected. Nice guy on the surface, successful lawyer, respected in the community, treated Emma like a princess whenever she visited. But I'd see how he talked to Sarah, my ex, the little comments about what she wore, who she spent time with, how he'd smile while he said it, like it was all just concern, just love. What happened? Sarah figured it out before it got too bad. She's got a spine made of steel under all that politeness. She kicked him out, got a divorce, moved to Seattle with a guy who actually treats her right. Daniel's expression darkened slightly. But I remember what she told me, how good he was at making her doubt herself, making her think she was the problem, that she was being ungrateful or oversensitive. That's exactly it, Olivia said, her voice gaining strength. When I finally ended it, when I told Marcus it was over, and I needed him to stop contacting me. He looked at me like I was crazy, like I was throwing away something precious. He told me I'd regret it, that I'd realize what I'd lost and come crawling back. But you didn't. No, Olivia said firmly. I didn't. And that's when it got worse. The calls, the emails, the showing up. It was like he couldn't accept that I had the right to say no, that my decision mattered. Daniel felt a familiar anger building in his chest. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, determined type that came from seeing someone deliberately hurt another person. The messages on your phone, he said. How long has he had this number? I changed my number when I moved, Olivia said. I've had this phone for less than 3 weeks. I don't know how he got it. Could someone have given it to him, a mutual friend? I didn't tell anyone the new number except my parents and my boss at my new job. And my parents would never… She stopped, a horrified realization crossing her face. My job. I had to provide references. My old supervisor at the Sacramento office. Marcus used to pick me up from work sometimes. They knew each other. If Marcus called pretending to be verifying employment or something, he could have gotten the name of your new company, Daniel finished, and from there, talked his way into getting your contact information. Jesus, Olivia whispered, setting down her fork. The plate was still half full, but her appetite had clearly vanished. He's that determined. He tracked me across 2 states. He got my new phone number. He found my building. Her voice was rising, panic creeping back in. What if he finds my apartment number? What if he's up there right now figuring out which door is mine? Hey, Daniel said, his voice firm but gentle. Look at me. He waited until her eyes met his. You're not alone in this anymore, okay? We're going to figure this out. We? Olivia repeated. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, Daniel interrupted. I'm choosing to. There's a difference. He moved around the counter, maintaining a respectful distance, but making sure she could see his face clearly. First thing tomorrow morning, we're going to the police. Not just to report the footsteps. We're showing them those messages. We're documenting everything. And then we're going to look into getting you a restraining order. I tried that in Sacramento, Olivia said hopelessly. They said I didn't have enough evidence, that his behavior, while concerning, didn't rise to the level of… That was Sacramento, Daniel cut in. This is Portland. Different jurisdiction, different judge. And you've got messages now where he's explicitly stating he's tracked you across state lines. That's not just harassment anymore. That could be stalking. That's a felony in Oregon. Olivia stared at him. How do you know that? I pay attention, Daniel said simply. And I've got a daughter. You better believe I've educated myself on every law designed to protect people from this kind of thing. He pulled out his phone, tapping at the screen. There's a precinct about 15 minutes from here. We can go first thing in the morning. I'll take a late start at the garage. My boss won't mind. What about Emma? Olivia asked. Your daughter. You can't just leave her. She's got school tomorrow. I drop her off at 7:30, go to the station with you, and still make it to work by 9. Daniel set his phone down. But for tonight, you're staying here. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, Daniel said. I'm offering. The couch pulls out. It's not the Ritz, but it's comfortable enough. And before you argue, think about this. Do you really want to go back upstairs right now? To sit in your apartment wondering if every sound you hear is him? Olivia closed her eyes, and Daniel saw her shoulders sag in defeat. No, she admitted quietly. I really don't. Then it's settled, Daniel said. He moved toward the small hallway closet, pulling out sheets and a blanket. You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow we deal with the police, and we keep dealing with this until you're safe, however long that takes. As he pulled out the couch and started making it up, Olivia watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between gratitude and disbelief. Why are you doing this? She asked finally. Really? You don't know me. This isn't your problem. Daniel paused in tucking the fitted sheet around the mattress, considering his answer. You know what I do for a living? He asked. You're a mechanic, you said. That's right. And you know what I've learned after 15 years of working on cars? He smoothed out a wrinkle in the sheet. Most problems seem impossible until someone actually decides to deal with them. You've got a busted fuel pump, it seems like the whole engine's shot. But it's not. You've just got to identify the problem, get the right tools, and fix it, one step at a time. I'm not a car, Olivia said, but there was a hint of a smile in her voice. No, you're not, Daniel agreed, tossing her a pillow. You're a person who's being harassed by someone who can't handle rejection. And that's a problem that can be fixed. It requires the right tools, legal documentation, police involvement, protective orders. But it can be fixed. He finished making up the bed and stepped back. Plus, he added, his tone lighter, I've got a 7-year-old who watches everything I do. She's learning from me what it means to be a good person, what it means to help someone who needs it. If I turned you away tonight, what would that teach her? Olivia sank down onto the edge of the pull-out bed, her hands gripping the edge of the mattress. I haven't felt safe in months, she said quietly. I forgot what it felt like. To not be constantly looking over my shoulder. To not jump every time my phone buzzes. You'll feel that way again, Daniel promised. It'll take time and it won't be easy, but you'll get there. He moved toward this hallway. Bathroom's through there if you need it. There's a spare toothbrush in the cabinet under the sink. Emma's dentist gives them out like candy. Help yourself to whatever you need. Daniel, Olivia said, and he turned back to face her. Thank you for listening, for believing me, for not making me feel crazy. You're not crazy, Daniel said firmly. You're being stalked. There's a difference. He gestured toward his bedroom door. I'll be right through there if you need anything. And Olivia, lock the front door behind me, deadbolt and chain. She nodded, standing to follow him to the door. As he turned the lock, he heard her take a shaky breath. Try to get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. After he closed his bedroom door, Daniel stood in the darkness for a long moment, listening to the sounds of Olivia moving around in his living room, the click of the deadbolt, the rattle of the chain, the creak of the pull-out bed as she settled onto it. Through the thin walls, he could hear the rain still drumming against the building. He thought about the messages on her phone, about a man so entitled, so convinced of his ownership over another person that he'd tracked her across 2 states, about the fear in Olivia's eyes when she'd stood in his doorway, pretending she needed sugar. Daniel moved to his window, looking out over the parking lot. The rain made it difficult to see clearly, but he scanned the visible cars anyway, looking for a black Audi. Nothing obvious caught his eye, but that didn't mean Marcus wasn't out there. Didn't mean he hadn't been in the building earlier, pacing outside Olivia's door. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Tommy, his boss at the garage. Still on for that engine rebuild tomorrow? Daniel typed back. Need to come in late. Family thing. Be there by 9. The response came quickly. No problem. Everything okay? Will be, Daniel replied. He set the phone aside and moved to check on Emma. She was sprawled across her bed, one arm flung over Mr. Hoppy, her stuffed rabbit. Her breathing was deep and even, completely unaware of the drama unfolding in the apartment just beyond her door. He adjusted her blanket and kissed her forehead gently. Love you, kiddo, he whispered. Back in his own room, Daniel lay down on top of his covers, fully clothed. He didn't expect to sleep much, not with a frightened woman in his living room and a potential threat lurking somewhere in the building. Instead, he stared at the ceiling, mentally running through tomorrow's plan. Police station first. Document everything. Get the formal process started for a restraining order. Make sure Olivia understood her rights, her options. Then assess her apartment's security. Did she have a deadbolt? A chain? A peephole? If not, he'd install them himself. Longer term, they'd need to think about cameras. Documentation. Maybe even consultation with a lawyer who specialized in stalking cases. Oregon had good laws on the books, but laws only worked if they were properly applied. His mind drifted to the way Olivia had looked when he'd offered her dinner, like she couldn't quite believe someone was helping her without wanting something in return. How long had she been dealing with this alone? How many people had she told who'd minimized her concerns, told her she was overreacting? The anger stirred again in his chest. Marcus Reed. He committed the name to memory, along with the details Olivia had shared. Black Audi A4, Sacramento. 8 months of dating, 4 months of escalating harassment. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, Daniel finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, his subconscious on alert for any unusual sounds from the apartment. When his alarm went off at 6, he woke immediately, disoriented for just a moment before yesterday's events came rushing back. He moved quietly through his morning routine, showering and dressing before going to wake Emma. She was already stirring, Mr. Hoppy clutched to her chest. Morning, sunshine, Daniel said, sitting on the edge of her bed. We've got someone staying with us today. A neighbor who needed help. Emma blinked at him sleepily. A neighbor? Her name's Olivia. She's sleeping on the couch. I need you to be extra quiet this morning while we get ready, okay? Is she sick? Emma asked, her 7-year-old logic making the natural connection. Not sick, Daniel said carefully. Just having a hard time. She needed a safe place to stay for the night. Emma processed this with the seriousness she applied to all of her father's explanations. Like when Samantha's mom came to stay with us that time? Daniel remembered. His friend Greg's wife had shown up at 2 in the morning after a particularly bad fight. Emma barely 3 years old at the time. Yeah, kind of like that. Okay, Emma said, sliding out of bed. I'll be quiet. True to her word, Emma moved through her morning routine with unusual stealth, brushing her teeth, getting dressed, and eating her cereal with barely a sound. Daniel made coffee, started a second pot for Olivia, and was packing Emma's lunch when he heard movement from the living room. Olivia emerged looking exhausted, but marginally better than she had the night before. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she'd changed into dry clothes, though they were clearly the same ones she'd been wearing under her soaked hoodie. Morning, Daniel said quietly. Coffee? Please, Olivia said gratefully. She noticed Emma at the kitchen table and managed a small smile. Hi there. Emma looked at her father, who nodded permission. Hi, Emma said. I'm Emma, I'm 7. Do you like dinosaurs? Despite everything, Olivia laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise even her. I do, actually. Did you know they had feathers? Emma asked seriously. Dad didn't know, but they did. The fossils prove it. Your dad sounds like he needs to do more research, Olivia said, accepting the coffee mug Daniel handed her. That's what I told him, Emma said triumphantly. Daniel shook his head, fighting back a smile. Glad you two are bonding over my ignorance. Em, go brush your teeth again. We're leaving in 5. After Emma scampered off, Olivia took a long sip of her coffee, her hands wrapped around the mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. She's wonderful, she said quietly. She is, Daniel agreed. He glanced at the clock. Listen, I need to drop her at school, but then we're heading straight to the police station. You ready for that? Olivia took a deep breath and nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. Good. Have you checked your phone this morning? Her expression darkened. 3 more messages, all sent between 2 and 4 a.m. What do they say? Olivia pulled out her phone and handed it to him without a word. Daniel scrolled through the messages, his jaw tightening with each one. 2:17 a.m. I saw your light on. I know you're not sleeping, neither am I. We used to stay up talking for hours, remember? 3:33 a.m. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 3:58 a.m. Fine, ignore me, but you can't hide forever. This building isn't that big, Olivia. I'll figure out which apartment is yours, and when I do, we're going to have that conversation whether you want to or not. Daniel handed the phone back, working to keep his voice level. That last one is a direct threat. The police will want to see these. He's escalating, Olivia said, her voice hollow. Every time I don't respond, he gets angrier. Which is why we're getting ahead of this today, Daniel said firmly. Emma reappeared, backpack slung over her shoulder, and he shifted into dad mode seamlessly. All right, kiddo, let's roll. As they headed for the door, Olivia stood. Should I come with you to drop her off? Daniel considered. Probably safer than staying here alone. Plus, it'll give us a head start to the station afterward. He grabbed his keys. Let's go. The rain had stopped, leaving the morning crisp and clean. Emma chattered about her upcoming science project the entire drive to school, seemingly unbothered by Olivia's presence in the back seat. When Daniel pulled up to the drop-off line, he turned to face his daughter. Remember, Grandma's picking you up today. I've got some things to take care of with Olivia. Is she in trouble? Emma asked, looking worried. No, Daniel said firmly. She's not in trouble, but she needs some help, and I'm going to make sure she gets it. That's what we do, right? We help people who need it. Emma nodded solemnly. Like you helped Mrs. Chen fix her car when she couldn't afford the shop prices. Exactly like that, Daniel said, warmth flooding his chest. He kissed her forehead. Love you, kiddo. Have a good day. Love you too, Dad. Emma climbed out of the car, then paused to wave at Olivia through the window. Bye, Olivia. I hope your trouble gets fixed. As they pulled away from the school, Olivia wiped at her eyes. Sorry, she said. It's just... She's so sweet, and the way she talks about helping people, like it's just what you do. It is just what you do, Daniel said simply. At least, it should be. He merged into traffic, heading toward the precinct. You ready to tell this story again? Olivia straightened her shoulders. Yeah, she said, strength creeping back into her voice. I'm ready. The Portland Police Bureau's East Precinct was a squat brick building that had seen better days. Daniel found parking on the street and they walked in together. Olivia's phone clutched in her hand like evidence, which Daniel supposed it was. The officer at the front desk was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. How can I help you? She asked. I need to report stalking and harassment, Olivia said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. And I need to file for a restraining order. The officer's expression shifted from routine politeness to focused attention. Come with me, she said, standing up. Let's get you somewhere private where we can talk. Daniel started to follow, but the officer held up a hand. Are you... I'm with her, Daniel said firmly. She's staying at my apartment because her stalker has been in our building. I'm a witness to the harassment. The officer studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, this way. They were led to a small interview room with a table, 3 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. The officer, her name tag read Patterson, sat across from them with a notepad and a tablet. Start from the beginning, she said gently to Olivia, and don't leave anything out. Every detail matters. So Olivia told her story again, the whole thing, from the charming beginning in Sacramento to the escalating control, the breakup, the harassment, the decision to move, and the messages that proved Marcus had tracked her across state lines. She showed Officer Patterson every text, every timeline, every detail she could remember. Daniel watched Olivia transform as she spoke, from frightened and defensive to clear and factual. She was reclaiming her narrative, he realized, taking back the power Marcus had tried to steal from her. Officer Patterson took notes, asked clarifying questions, and documented everything with methodical care. This is good, she said finally. You've got a strong case here. The messages alone show a pattern of harassment, and the fact that he tracked you across state lines elevates this significantly. I'm going to start the paperwork for a restraining order right now, and I want you to meet with our domestic violence unit. They specialize in cases like this. How long will the restraining order take? Daniel asked. Temporary order can be issued as soon as today if we can get you in front of a judge. Permanent order will require a hearing, usually within 30 days. Officer Patterson stood. Wait here. I'm going to get Detective Morris. She's going to want to hear this directly. As they waited, Olivia let out a long, shaky breath. They're actually taking me seriously, she said, almost disbelieving. They should, Daniel said. What he's doing, it's illegal. It's wrong. And now it's documented. When Detective Morris arrived, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair, the process started all over again. More questions, more documentation, more details pulled from Olivia's memory. Through it all, Daniel sat beside her, a steady presence that seemed to give her strength. Finally, 3 hours after they'd arrived, they walked out of the precinct with paperwork for a temporary restraining order that would be served to Marcus Reed within 24 hours, an appointment with a victim advocate for the following day, and a direct line to Detective Morris's cell phone. If he contacts you again, if you see him, if anything happens, you call me immediately, Morris had said, handing Olivia her card. And stay somewhere safe until this restraining order is served, somewhere he doesn't know about. In the car, Olivia stared at the paperwork in her hands like she couldn't quite believe it was real. They believed me, she said quietly. They actually believed me. Why wouldn't they? Daniel asked, pulling out of the parking lot. Because in Sacramento they didn't. They said I was being paranoid. That Marcus's behavior, while concerning, didn't constitute a real threat, that I should just block him and move on with my life. Olivia's hands tightened on the papers. Like it was that simple. Like I hadn't tried everything already. Well, Portland's not Sacramento, Daniel said, and Detective Morris seems like she knows her stuff. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Olivia spoke again. Detective Morris said I should stay somewhere safe, somewhere he doesn't know about. My couch is still available, Daniel offered. I can't keep imposing. You're not imposing, Daniel interrupted. Look, here's the practical reality. He knows you're building. He's probably been inside. Until that restraining order is served and he knows there will be legal consequences for coming near you, you're not safe in that apartment. So you stay with me and Emma until this gets sorted. It's not charity. It's common sense. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. Your daughter, she finally said. Emma, this isn't her problem either. Is it fair to bring this into her life? Daniel thought about Emma's question that morning. Is she in trouble? And his own response. She's not in trouble, but she needs some help, and I'm going to make sure she gets it. Emma's learning what it means to help people, he said. She's learning that when someone needs you, you show up. That's a lesson worth teaching, even if the circumstances aren't ideal. He glanced at Olivia. Besides, kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. She'll be fine. Okay, Olivia said softly. Thank you for all of this. I don't know how I'll ever... You don't need to repay me, Daniel said. Just focus on getting through this, one day at a time. When they got back to the apartment complex, Daniel insisted on walking Olivia to her apartment to gather some clothes and essentials. The hallway was empty, the building quiet in the late morning lull. Olivia unlocked her door with the hands that shook slightly, and Daniel followed her inside. Her apartment was neat but sparse, the look of someone who'd moved in recently and hadn't fully unpacked. A few boxes sat stacked against one wall, and the furniture had the generic quality of items bought quickly out of necessity rather than preference. I'll just be a minute, Olivia said, disappearing into the bedroom. Daniel stayed in the living room, but his mechanic's eye was already cataloging security issues. The door had a standard lock, but no deadbolt, no chain. The peephole was there, but scratched and difficult to see through clearly. The windows? The windows. Daniel moved closer, examining the locks. They were old, the kind that could be popped open with a screwdriver if someone knew what they were doing, and they faced the fire escape. Olivia, he called, come here for a second. She emerged from the bedroom with an armful of clothes. What's wrong? These window locks, Daniel said, pointing. They're basically useless, and they open right onto the fire escape. Has anyone been out there recently? Olivia's face went pale. She set down the clothes and moved to the window, looking out. The fire escape was empty, but there were scuff marks on the metal platform that looked fresh. I heard something a few nights ago, she said slowly. Like metal scraping. I thought it was just the building settling, or maybe a cat. But it might have been someone checking if they could get in through here, Daniel finished grimly. He tested the lock. It was loose, barely holding. We're installing better locks today, and you're not staying here alone until they're in. They finished gathering Olivia's things in tense silence, both of them hyper-aware of the vulnerabilities Daniel had just exposed. When they made it back to his apartment, Daniel immediately called Tommy at the garage. I need the rest of the day, he said. That family thing, it's bigger than I thought. Whatever you need, man, Tommy said. Family comes first. Everything okay? Getting there, Daniel said. He hung up and turned to Olivia. All right, hardware store run, then we're upgrading your security. Tonight, you're still on my couch. Tomorrow, we'll see where we stand after the restraining order gets served. You don't have to do all this. Yeah, Daniel said, grabbing his keys again. I do. As they headed out the door, neither of them noticed the black Audi that had just pulled into the parking lot, its driver watching their building with cold, patient eyes. The hardware store was a 20-minute drive across town, one of those old family-owned places that smelled like sawdust and machine oil. Daniel navigated the aisles with practiced efficiency, pulling deadbolts, chain locks, and reinforced window latches from the shelves while Olivia followed, still clutching the restraining order paperwork like a lifeline. You really know your way around this stuff, she observed as he examined two different deadbolt models, testing the weight and mechanisms with his calloused hands. Grew up helping my old man with construction jobs, Daniel said, selecting the heavier of the two. Learned early that good locks are the difference between feeling safe and actually being safe. He added it to the cart along with a second set. One for your door, one as a backup. And we're getting you a security bar for the slider, too. At the register, Olivia reached for her wallet, but Daniel waved her off. I've got it. Daniel, you can't keep paying for everything. Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better, he said, handing his card to the cashier. "Pay me back when all this is over, and you're settled." The older woman behind the register glanced between them, her experienced eyes seeming to read the situation in an instant. "Upgrading security?" she asked gently, directing the question at Olivia. "Yes," Olivia said, lifting her chin slightly. "Someone's been bothering me." The woman nodded, her expression understanding. "Smart move. My daughter went through something similar a few years back." She bagged the locks with careful hands. "These deadbolts are solid. Had my husband installed the same model at her place. Nobody's getting through those without making a whole lot of noise." "Thank you," Olivia said quietly. "You take care of yourself, honey," the woman said, then looked at Daniel. "And you're a good man for helping." Back in the car, Olivia was silent for several blocks before speaking. "Does everyone just see it?" she asked. "What I'm going through?" "Not everyone, Pissot," Daniel said, "but people who've seen it before recognize the signs. The way you keep checking your phone, how you looked over your shoulder 3 times in the parking lot, the fact that you're buying locks in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon with a guy you barely know." He glanced at her. "It's not your fault that it's visible. It's Marcus's fault for making it necessary." They returned to the apartment complex just after noon. The parking lot was fuller now, residents coming and going on their lunch breaks. Daniel's eyes automatically scanned for the black Audi Olivia had described, but he didn't see it. That didn't mean Marcus wasn't around, though. He could have parked on the street, could be watching from any number of vantage points. "Let's get this done," Daniel said, grabbing the bag of locks from the back seat. Olivia's apartment felt different in the daylight, less threatening, but also more obviously vulnerable. Daniel went straight to work on the door, removing the old lock with quick, efficient movements. Olivia stood nearby, watching his hands move with the kind of practiced confidence that came from years of similar work. "You make it look easy," she said. "It is easy once you know what you're doing," Daniel replied, fitting the new deadbolt into place. "Most people just never learn. They trust that the landlord installed something adequate, and half the time they didn't." He tested the bolt, sliding it in and out several times. "This one's solid. Grade 1 rating. Someone tries to kick this door in, they're going to break their foot before they break the lock." He installed the chain next, then moved to the windows. The old locks came off easily, too easily, confirming Daniel's suspicion that they'd been barely functional to begin with. As he worked on the first window, Olivia's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Her whole body went rigid. Daniel looked up from the window frame, watching as she approached the phone like it might bite her. When she picked it up, her face went pale. "It's him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel set down his screwdriver and moved to her side. "What does it say?" Olivia's hands trembled as she turned the screen toward him. The message was time-stamped 3 minutes ago. "Saw you leave this morning with some guy. New boyfriend already? That was fast. Guess I was right about you all along." "He was watching," Olivia breathed. "He saw us leave together. He saw—" She pressed her hand to her mouth, looking like she might be sick. "Hey," Daniel said firmly, gently taking the phone from her shaking hands. "Look at me. This is good." "Good?" Olivia stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "He's watching us. He knows about you now. How is that good?" "Because he just gave us more evidence," Daniel said, screenshotting the message. "I'm forwarding this to Detective Morris right now. He's not just threatening you anymore. He's conducting surveillance, following you. That strengthens your restraining order." He typed quickly, sending the screenshot and a brief explanation to the detective's number. The response came within 2 minutes. Documented. This behavior supports immediate issuance of TRO. Judge already signed off. Order being processed for service now. Stay vigilant. Daniel showed the message to Olivia. "The temporary restraining order is official. They're serving it to him today. Once that happens, if he comes within 100 feet of you, it's a criminal violation. He goes to jail." "But he doesn't know that yet," Olivia said, wrapping her arms around herself. "Right now he thinks he can still—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Which is why we're finishing these locks and why you're not staying here alone," Daniel said. He went back to the window, working faster now. The afternoon sun slanted through the glass, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. Outside, the fire escape stood empty, but Daniel found himself checking it every few minutes. By the time he finished the last window lock, it was nearly 2 o'clock. Daniel tested each one methodically, making sure they held firm. These aren't just decorative, he explained, showing Olivia how they worked. Someone tries to pry these open from outside. The mechanism locks down tighter. They'd have to break the glass to get in, and that makes noise. Thank you, Olivia said, running her fingers over the new lock. I didn't even realize how unsafe I was until you pointed it out. Most people don't, Daniel said, packing up his tools. We trust that someone else has thought about our safety, but sometimes you've got to take it into your own hands. They were heading toward the door when they heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy, deliberate footsteps that seemed to pause right outside Olivia's apartment. Both of them froze. Daniel moved instinctively between Olivia and the door, one hand reaching for his phone. The footsteps continued past, fading as they moved toward the stairwell. Olivia released a breath she'd been holding. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't live like this, jumping at every sound. You won't have to, Daniel said quietly. Not forever. But for right now, we're going back to my place. You're going to pack a proper bag, enough clothes for a week, and you're going to stay with Emma and me until we're absolutely certain you're safe. A week? Olivia looked overwhelmed. I can't impose on you for a week. You're not imposing, Daniel interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. You're accepting help from someone who's offering it freely. There's a difference. He opened the door carefully, checking the hallway before gesturing for her to follow. Come on, let's get you settled properly. Back in Daniel's apartment, Olivia set up a temporary base in the corner of the living room. She'd packed more carefully this time, a rolling suitcase with actual outfits instead of the handful of clothes she'd grabbed in panic the day before. Daniel had cleared space in his coat closet for her things and brought out extra hangers. Emma gets home around 3:30, Daniel said, glancing at his watch. My mom picks her up from school and brings her back here. Fair warning, Mom's going to have questions. About me? Olivia asked. About why there's a strange woman living on my couch, Daniel said with a wry smile. She means well, but she's protective, especially after the divorce. What should I tell her? The truth, Daniel said simply, that you're in a tough situation and I'm helping out. Mom's old school, but she's not judgmental. She'll probably try to feed you. He was right. When Patricia Hayes walked through the door at 3:40 with Emma in tow, her sharp eyes took in the suitcase, Olivia's nervous posture, and her son's protective stance in about 3 seconds flat. Grandma, this is Olivia, Emma announced before anyone else could speak. She's staying with us because she has trouble and Dad's fixing it. Did you know that dinosaurs had feathers? Patricia's stern expression softened into something almost amused. I did know that, sweetheart. Why don't you go put your backpack away while I talk to your dad and Miss Olivia? Once Emma had skipped off to her room, Patricia turned her full attention on them. She was in her early 60s, with gray hair cut short and the same direct gaze Daniel had inherited. So, she said, setting her purse on the counter, what kind of trouble are we talking about? Daniel started to answer, but Olivia spoke first. The kind that involves a restraining order and police involvement, she said, meeting Patricia's eyes steadily. I have an ex-boyfriend who won't accept that we're over. He followed me from Sacramento. I moved into this building 3 weeks ago, and he found me. Daniel's been helping me deal with it. Patricia studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. You went to the police? Got it documented? This morning, Daniel confirmed. Temporary restraining order was signed a few hours ago. They're serving it today. And you're staying here until this man backs off, Patricia said. It wasn't a question. If that's okay, Olivia said quietly. I don't want to be a burden. If you were a burden, my son wouldn't have offered, Patricia interrupted. Daniel's many things, but he's not stupid. He wouldn't bring this into Emma's life if he didn't think it was the right thing to do. She moved to the kitchen, already pulling out ingredients from the refrigerator. You eaten lunch? I'm not really hungry. Wasn't asking if you were hungry, Patricia said, her tone brooking no argument. I was asking if you'd eaten. Stress makes people forget to take care of themselves. Can't think straight on an empty stomach. She glanced at Daniel. Your father used to say that. I remember, Daniel said softly. As Patricia set about making sandwiches with the efficiency of someone who'd raised children and knew how to stretch a meal, Emma emerged from her room with a book about dinosaurs. Olivia, can I show you my favorite one? She asked shyly. Olivia looked to Daniel, who nodded encouragingly. Sure, she said, settling onto the couch. Emma climbed up beside her, opening the book to a page showing a feathered velociraptor. See? Emma said triumphantly. Feathers. Dad thought they were all scaly like lizards, but that's wrong. They were like big chickens. Terrifying big chickens, Olivia said, and despite everything, there was genuine warmth in her voice. Your dad really didn't know about the feathers? He's learning, Emma said charitably. He knows a lot about cars, but not everything about dinosaurs. That's okay. Nobody knows everything. From the kitchen, Patricia caught Daniel's eye and gave him a small nod of approval. He understood what she wasn't saying out loud. Olivia was good with Emma, natural and kind despite her own fear and stress. That mattered. They ate lunch together at the small kitchen table, Emma dominating the conversation with details about her upcoming science fair project. Olivia listened attentively, asking questions that made Emma light up with excitement. Patricia watched it all with quiet observation, occasionally catching Daniel's eye with expressions that spoke volumes. After Emma had been sent to do her homework, Patricia pulled Daniel aside in the kitchen, while Olivia took a phone call from Detective Morris in the living room. She seems like a good person, Patricia said quietly, rinsing dishes in the sink. She is, Daniel agreed. This ex of hers, how dangerous is he? Daniel considered his answer carefully. Dangerous enough that she fled across 2 states. Dangerous enough that the police took it seriously immediately, but not dangerous in the way that makes me think Emma's at risk. He's fixated on Olivia, not random violence. Patricia's hand stilled in the soapy water. But you're involved now. If he sees you as competition, then he'll have to deal with the fact that I'm 6'2" and grew up in a neighborhood where you learned to handle yourself, Daniel said flatly. I'm not scared of Marcus Reed, Mom. I'm just careful. There's a difference. Your father would be proud of you, Patricia said softly. Helping someone who needs it. That's what he always taught you. I know, Daniel said. He glanced toward the living room where Olivia was speaking in low tones on her phone. She reminds me of that woman Sarah tried to help back in Seattle, the one whose husband kept showing up at her work. Patricia nodded, remembering. The one who finally got away when the company relocated her to their Vancouver office. Yeah, sometimes distance isn't enough. Sometimes you need people around you who won't let you fall. Olivia ended her call and returned to the kitchen, her expression troubled. Detective Morris said they went to serve the restraining order at the address I gave them in Sacramento, Marcus's last known residence. But the landlord said he moved out 6 weeks ago, no forwarding address. So he planned this, Daniel said grimly. He knew he was coming after you before you even got here. They're trying to locate him through his work, but apparently he quit his job about the same time. Olivia sank into a chair. He's been living off savings, I guess. Nothing tying him to any particular place, which means he's mobile and focused entirely on you, Patricia finished, her voice sharp with anger. That boy needs more than a restraining order. He needs a cell. First, we have to serve him the order, Daniel said. Then we have evidence every time he violates it. It builds a case. In the meantime, she's vulnerable, Patricia pointed out. In the meantime, she's here, Daniel corrected. With us, not alone. Emma appeared in the doorway, sensing the tension in the room with the intuition children sometimes possessed. Is everything okay? She asked quietly. Everything's fine, sweetheart, Daniel said, forcing his voice into calmer registers. Just grown-up talk? You finish your homework? Most of it. I'm stuck on the math problem about fractions. Want some help? Olivia offered, standing up. I used to tutor math in college. Emma's face brightened. Really? As Olivia and Emma settled at the table with the math homework, Patricia pulled Daniel aside once more. I like her, she said simply, and Emma clearly does too. But you need to be careful, Daniel. This situation, it's complicated. And you've got your daughter to think about. I know, Mom, Daniel said. I'm being careful. Are you? Patricia's gaze was penetrating. Because from where I'm standing, you've brought a woman running from a stalker into your home, installed locks on her apartment, gone to the police with her, and now you're playing tutor and bodyguard. That's not careful. That's involved. Daniel met his mother's eyes steadily. Would you have wanted me to do anything different? Patricia sighed, her expression softening. No, she admitted. I wouldn't have. But that doesn't mean I don't worry. She glanced toward the table where Olivia was patiently explaining fractions using the dinosaur book as a visual aid. Just remember, when this is over, she's going to move on with her life. And you and Emma will still be here, dealing with whatever aftermath comes from all this. I know, Daniel said again, but he wondered if he really did. If he'd really thought through all the implications of what he'd started when he opened his door to a scared woman asking for sugar she didn't need. The afternoon faded into evening. Patricia left with promises to check in tomorrow and a stern reminder to Daniel to call if anything felt off. Emma had dinner, spaghetti that Daniel made while Olivia helped set the table. And then the three of them settled in to watch one of Emma's favorite movies, something animated involving talking animals and adventure. Halfway through, Emma fell asleep curled against Olivia's side, her small hand resting on Olivia's arm. Olivia looked down at the sleeping child with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. Something tender and sad all at once. She trusts easily, Daniel said quietly, careful not to wake Emma. She feels safe, Olivia replied, stroking Emma's hair gently. That's a gift you've given her. Not every kid gets to feel that way. Did you, growing up? Olivia was quiet for a moment. My parents were good people, loving, but they fought a lot. About money, about my dad's drinking, about my mom's family. I spent a lot of my childhood trying to be small enough, quiet enough, perfect enough that they wouldn't have one more thing to fight about. She smiled sadly. Funny how we repeat patterns, isn't it? I spent my whole relationship with Marcus trying to be exactly what he wanted so he wouldn't get upset. That's not your fault, Daniel said firmly. I know that now. Intellectually, anyway. But knowing something and believing it are different things. She looked down at Emma again. She's lucky to have you, to have grown up knowing that love doesn't come with conditions. Daniel carefully picked up his sleeping daughter, cradling her against his chest. I'm going to put her to bed. Be right back. In Emma's room, he tucked her in carefully, making sure Mr. Hoppy was positioned just right. She stirred slightly as he kissed her forehead. Dad? She murmured, half asleep. Yeah, kiddo? I like Olivia. She's nice. She is, Daniel agreed softly. Is she going to stay with us for a long time? Daniel hesitated, unsure how to answer that question. I don't know, sweetheart. We're just helping her right now, okay? Making sure she's safe. Okay, Emma said, already drifting back to sleep. That's good. We're good at helping people. Back in the living room, Olivia had pulled out her laptop and was typing furiously. What are you working on? Daniel asked. Email to my boss, she said without looking up, explaining that I might need some flexibility over the next few weeks while I deal with a personal situation. I don't want to give details, but I also don't want them thinking I'm unreliable so soon after starting. What do? You said marketing, but digital marketing for a tech startup, social media strategy, content creation, brand positioning. She hit send and closed the laptop. It's all remote work, which is why I could move here without changing jobs. Silver lining, I guess. At least Marcus doesn't know where my office is because there isn't one. That's something, Daniel agreed. He settled into the armchair across from her. Detective Morris say anything else? They've flagged Marcus's driver's license, car registration, credit cards, anything that might ping a location. And they're contacting Sacramento PD to see if there were any other complaints filed against him that I don't know about. Sometimes guys like this have a pattern. Usually do, Daniel said grimly. Control issues don't just appear out of nowhere. Olivia studied him in the lamplight. You know a lot about this stuff. More than most people would. I pay attention, Daniel said. And I've seen what happens when people don't take this kind of thing seriously. Friend of mine in high school, her boyfriend seemed great at first. Charming, attentive, all that. Then he started getting possessive, jealous. By senior year, she was apologizing for talking to other guys in class, changing her clothes if he thought they were too revealing, making excuses for the bruises. What happened to her? Her parents finally pulled her out of school, sent her to live with her aunt in another state. Last I heard, she was doing okay, married to someone who treats her right, but it took years for her to feel safe again. Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious. That's why I'm not letting you go through this alone, Olivia, because I've seen what it does to people when they have to. Olivia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't know what I did to deserve someone like you showing up in my life right now. You didn't have to deserve it, Daniel said simply. You just had to need it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the movie still playing quietly in the background. Finally, Olivia stood and stretched. I should probably try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. You need anything? Extra blanket? Different pillow? No, I'm good, thank you, for everything. She paused at the edge of the pull-out bed. Daniel, what your mom said earlier, about being careful. She's right, you know. You are getting involved in something complicated. I know, Daniel said. And you're still willing to… Yes, he interrupted gently. I'm still willing. Get some sleep, Olivia. After she'd settled in and he'd retreated to his own room, Daniel lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of his apartment. Emma's soft breathing from down the hall, the quiet rustle of Olivia shifting on the pull-out bed, the distant hum of traffic outside. His mother's words echoed in his mind. That's not careful, that's involved. She was right, of course. He was involved now, in ways that went beyond simple neighborly assistance. He'd brought Olivia into his home, into Emma's life, and there would be consequences to that choice, regardless of how things turned out. But what else could he have done? Let her face this alone? Send her back to her apartment to jump at every sound, to live in fear of when Marcus would finally figure out which door was hers? No. He'd made the right choice, he was sure of that. What he wasn't sure about was the feeling that had settled in his chest when he'd watched Olivia helping Emma with her homework, or the way his heart had clenched when she'd looked down at his sleeping daughter with such tender sadness. That was dangerous territory, complicated territory, the kind that could lead to problems far beyond the immediate threat of Marcus Reed. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, the immediate concern was keeping Olivia safe and making sure Emma continued to feel secure in her own home. Daniel rolled over, forcing his mind toward sleep. Tomorrow he'd go to work, keep his phone close in case Detective Morris called with updates on serving the restraining order. Tomorrow he'd come home and check all the locks twice, make dinner for 3 instead of 2, and continue navigating this strange new reality he'd walked into when he opened his door to a frightened woman asking for sugar. One day at a time, one problem at a time. It was the only way to get through situations like this without drowning in the what-ifs and maybes. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and steady. In the parking lot below, a black Audi sat 3 spaces down from Daniel's truck, its driver watching the lit windows of apartment 2B with patient, possessive eyes. Marcus Reed had always been good at waiting, good at watching, good at learning patterns and exploiting weaknesses. And he'd just identified Daniel Hayes as a weakness, a complication that would need to be dealt with before he could have the conversation with Olivia that he'd traveled 500 miles to have. In the morning, he'd make his move. For now, he watched, and he waited, and he planned. The rain fell harder, drumming against metal and glass, washing everything clean even as it concealed the darkness gathering just beyond the light. Daniel woke to the sound of his phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. The room was still dark, the alarm clock showing 5:43 in red digital numbers. He grabbed the phone, his heart already racing with the assumption that something had gone wrong. Detective Morris's name glowed on the screen. "Hayes," he answered, his voice rough with sleep. "Mr. Hayes, this is Detective Morris. Sorry to call so early, but I wanted to update you before you started your day." There was an edge to her voice that made Daniel sit up fully. "We attempted to serve Marcus Reed the restraining order yesterday evening. Officers located his vehicle in your apartment complex parking lot at approximately 7:15 p.m. Daniel's blood ran cold. He was here, in the parking lot? His car was. He wasn't in it. Officers waited for 40 minutes, but he never returned to the vehicle. We ran the plates to confirm it was his. Black Audi A4, registered to Marcus William Reed, Sacramento address. The car's still there now. We've got a unit doing periodic drive-bys, but we can't legally tow it or search it without probable cause." "So he knows the police are looking for him," Daniel said, already swinging his legs out of bed. "Most likely. The fact that he didn't return to his car suggests he saw the patrol unit and avoided contact." Morris paused. "Mr. Hayes, I need you to understand the situation clearly. Marcus Reed knows the police are involved. He knows there's legal action pending, and instead of backing off, he's escalated to physical surveillance of Miss Carter's location. This is the most dangerous phase. What do you mean, most dangerous? When stalkers realize they're losing control of the situation, they sometimes make desperate moves. The restraining order can't be served until we make physical contact with him, which means legally he hasn't violated anything yet. But his behavior suggests he's preparing to make direct contact with Ms. Carter, and soon. Daniel was fully awake now, his mind racing through implications. What do we do? Ms. Carter needs to stay where she is, with you, where she's not alone. Don't let her go anywhere by herself. We're actively searching for Reed, and the moment we locate him, we'll serve the order. Once that's done, any contact becomes a criminal violation. Morris's voice softened slightly. I know this isn't what you signed up for, Mr. Hayes. If you need to step back from this situation— I'm not stepping back, Daniel interrupted firmly. I just need to know how to keep everyone safe. Vigilance, awareness. Don't open your door without checking who it is. Keep your phone on you at all times. And if you see Reed, don't engage. Call 911 immediately and get yourself and Ms. Carter to safety. Let us handle him. After the call ended, Daniel sat in the darkness for a long moment, processing. Marcus had been here, in the parking lot, watching. While they'd been eating dinner, while Emma had fallen asleep against Olivia's side, while Daniel had tucked his daughter into bed, Marcus Reed had been 3 floors below, waiting. The thought made his jaw clench with an anger that was becoming increasingly difficult to contain. He dressed quickly and moved quietly through the apartment. The living room was still dark, but he could make out Olivia's form on the pull-out bed, curled on her side facing away from him. For a moment he considered waking her to share Morris's update, but decided to let her sleep. She'd need her rest for whatever this day brought. Instead, Daniel moved to the window and looked down at the parking lot. The streetlights cast pools of orange illumination across the wet pavement, and there, 3 spaces from his truck, sat a black Audi. Even from this distance, he could see it was empty, the windows dark. Marcus was here somewhere, in the building maybe, or watching from some other vantage point, waiting for an opportunity. Daniel's hands curled into fists against the window frame. Every instinct in his body wanted to go down there, to confront this man who'd terrorized Olivia across 2 states. But Morris's words echoed in his mind. Don't engage, let us handle him. He forced himself to step back from the window, to channel his anger into something productive. He checked every lock in the apartment, door, windows, the sliding glass door to the small balcony. All secure. Then he moved to Emma's room, standing in her doorway and watching her sleep peacefully, Mr. Hoppy clutched to her chest. This was what mattered, keeping his daughter safe, keeping Olivia safe. Everything else was secondary. By 6:30, Daniel had coffee brewing and was scrambling eggs when Olivia emerged from the living room, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail and her eyes still heavy with sleep. You're up early, she said, then noticed his expression. What happened? Daniel told her about Morris's call, watching her face go from sleepy confusion to sharp fear as he explained about the Audi in the parking lot, about Marcus evading the police, about the restraining order still unserved. He was here, Olivia whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. Last night, while we were just— She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. While we were safe inside, Daniel finished for her, and that's where you're going to stay. No going to your apartment, no stepping outside alone. Not until this is resolved. I can't hide forever, Daniel. I have to work. I have to live my life. You work remotely, Daniel pointed out. You can do that from here just as easily as from your apartment. And living your life can wait a few days until the police actually manage to serve this restraining order and Marcus understands there are consequences for coming near you. Olivia sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her hands trembling slightly as she accepted the coffee mug Daniel offered. This is insane. He's making me a prisoner in my own life, and he's not even here. Just the threat of him is enough to— She stopped, pressing her palms against her eyes. I hate this. I hate feeling powerless. You're not powerless, Daniel said firmly. You went to the police. You got the legal system involved. You're taking steps to protect yourself. That's the opposite of powerless. Then why does it feel like he's still controlling everything? Her voice cracked slightly. Why does it feel like no matter what I do, he's always one step ahead? Daniel pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Because guys like Marcus, they make it their full-time job. They spend every waking moment thinking about you, planning, watching. It feels like they're omnipotent because they're obsessed. But that obsession is also their weakness. Olivia. It makes them reckless. It makes them leave evidence. And eventually, it makes them cross a line that puts them in handcuffs. How long is eventually? Olivia asked quietly. How long do I have to live like this before... She was interrupted by her phone buzzing on the counter. They both stared at it like it was a live grenade. Want me to check it? Daniel offered. Olivia shook her head, reaching for the phone with shaking hands. Her face went pale as she read the screen. Without a word, she turned it toward Daniel. The message was from an unknown number, time-stamped just 2 minutes ago. I know you're in 2B, with him, with his kid. Nice family he's got. Be a shame if something happened to them because you're too stubborn to have a simple conversation with me. The threat was clear, direct, and it crossed every line Daniel had been mentally drawing. That's it, he said, his voice deadly calm as he pulled out his own phone. That's an explicit threat. He just threatened Emma. He was already dialing Morris's number, his free hand clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Morris answered on the second ring, and Daniel read her the message word for word, his voice tight with controlled fury. He's threatening my daughter, a 7-year-old child. What happens now? Now it becomes a felony, Morris said, her own voice sharp with anger. Forward me that message immediately. I'm escalating this to our fugitive apprehension team. Marcus Reed just graduated from stalking to terroristic threatening. We're not playing around anymore. Good, Daniel said flatly. Because neither am I. After forwarding the message and ending the call, Daniel looked at Olivia, who had tears streaming silently down her face. I'm so sorry, she choked out. I brought this to your door. I put Emma in danger. I should leave. You should stay right where you are, Daniel interrupted, moving around the table to crouch beside her chair. Listen to me. Marcus made that threat, not you. Marcus is the one terrorizing people, not you. And if you leave, if you go back to being alone and isolated, that's exactly what he wants. That's how he wins. But Emma is my responsibility. And I'm telling you that the best way to keep her safe is to make sure you're not alone when Marcus finally makes his move. Because he will make a move, Olivia. Guys like him always do. And when he does, I want him walking into a situation where there are witnesses, where there are people who can call the police, where he can't just... Daniel stopped himself, taking a breath. You're safer here. We're all safer with you here. Emma's voice came from the hallway, small and uncertain. Dad? Why is Olivia crying? Daniel stood quickly, moving to intercept his daughter before she could fully enter the kitchen. Hey kiddo, everything's okay. Olivia just got some upsetting news, but we're handling it. Emma looked past him to where Olivia was wiping her eyes. Is it about the trouble you're fixing? Yeah, Daniel said. Yeah, it's about that. But you don't need to worry, okay? That's grown-up stuff. Okay, Emma said, though her young face showed concern beyond her years. Can I give Olivia a hug? Hugs help when you're sad. Daniel glanced at Olivia, who nodded slightly. That would be really nice, Emma, she managed to say. Emma crossed to Olivia and wrapped her small arms around her, the gesture so pure and uncomplicated that it made Daniel's chest ache. It's okay, Emma said seriously. My dad fixes things. He'll fix your trouble too. Olivia let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and hugged Emma back. Thank you, sweetheart. The morning routine proceeded with a surreal normalcy. Daniel made breakfast while keeping one eye on his phone and the other on the window. Emma ate her cereal and chattered about her upcoming science fair project, seemingly unconcerned by the tension vibrating through the apartment. Olivia managed to eat a few bites of toast, though Daniel noticed her checking her phone compulsively every few minutes. When it was time to take Emma to school, Daniel made a decision. We're all going, he announced. Nobody stays here alone. Daniel, you can't keep disrupting your whole life, Olivia started. Not debatable, Daniel cut her off. Get dressed. We leave in 10 minutes. The drive to Emma's school was tense, Daniel's eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror for any sign of the black Audi. Olivia sat in the passenger seat, her body rigid with anxiety, while Emma provided a running commentary from the back seat about the spelling test she had that day. At the school drop-off line, Daniel walked Emma all the way to the entrance, something he hadn't done since her first week of kindergarten. Hey kiddo, he said, kneeling down to her level. I need you to do me a favor today. Okay? Emma said seriously. If anyone you don't know tries to talk to you, or if you see anyone hanging around who seems out of place, you tell a teacher immediately, okay? Emma's eyes widened slightly. Is this about Olivia's trouble? It's about me being extra careful, Daniel said, keeping his voice calm. Just promise me, okay? Stranger danger rules all day today. I promise, Emma said solemnly. Then she hugged him tight. Love you, Dad. Love you too, sunshine. He watched until she disappeared through the school doors, then called the office to explain that only he, his mother, or the school's existing authorized contacts should be allowed to pick Emma up. No exceptions. Back in the car, Olivia was staring straight ahead. You had to warn your daughter about my stalker. I can't. Stop, Daniel said firmly, pulling out of the parking lot. Emma needed to hear that anyway. World's not always safe, and she's old enough to understand basic safety rules. This isn't about you ruining her innocence or whatever you're telling yourself right now. They drove in silence for a few blocks before Olivia spoke again. Where are we going? You said you had to work. Called Tommy while you were getting dressed. Taking a personal day. Right now, we're going back to the apartment, and you're going to do your work while I make some phone calls. Then we're going to wait for the police to call us and tell us they've found Marcus. And if they don't find him, then we adapt, Daniel said simply. One problem at a time, remember? The apartment felt different when they returned, like the threat that had been theoretical before had suddenly become concrete. Daniel did another check of all the locks while Olivia set up her laptop at the kitchen table, her fingers moving mechanically across the keyboard as she tried to focus on work emails. Daniel's phone rang at 9:30. Detective Morris. We found his hotel, she said without preamble. Motel 6 about 3 miles from your location. He checked in 4 days ago under his real name. We've got units there now, but he's not in his room and his car's still at your building. We're sitting on both locations waiting for him to surface. What about a search warrant for his hotel room? Daniel asked. Working on it. Should have it within the hour. If there's anything in there that indicates his intentions, we'll find it. Morris paused. How's Ms. Carter holding up? Daniel glanced at Olivia, who was staring at her laptop screen with unseeing eyes. She's scared. We both are. Understandable. Just sit tight. We're going to find him, Mr. Hayes. And when we do, he's going to jail. The threat he made this morning guaranteed that. After the call ended, Daniel relayed the information to Olivia. She absorbed it silently, then asked, what if he doesn't go back to either place? What if he's just out there, watching, waiting for one of us to be alone? Then he's going to be waiting a long time, Daniel said, because that's not happening. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Olivia worked or tried to, while Daniel occupied himself with small tasks around the apartment. He did laundry, cleaned the kitchen, organized Emma's bookshelf, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind from spinning through worst-case scenarios. At 11:47, Olivia's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her face went ashen. It's him. It's Marcus. He's calling me. Don't answer, Daniel said immediately, already pulling out his own phone to call Morris. Let it go to voicemail. They both stared at Olivia's phone as it rang and rang, finally clicking over to voicemail. 10 seconds later, a notification appeared. One new voicemail. The police need to hear this, Daniel said, his call to Morris already connecting. Don't listen to it without them on the line. With Morris conferenced in and recording, Olivia played the voicemail on speaker. Marcus Reed's voice filled the apartment, smooth and reasonable, in a way that made Daniel's skin crawl. Olivia, sweetheart, I know you're scared. I know you think I'm the bad guy here. But you have to understand, I've spent 4 months trying to get through to you, trying to make you see that we're meant to be together. I've been patient, I've been understanding, but you're not giving me any choice here. You're hiding behind lawyers and police and some mechanic who doesn't know you like I do. This needs to end. Today. I'll be at the Riverside Apartments parking lot at 2 p.m. Come down and talk to me. Just you. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. If you keep hiding, if you keep letting other people interfere in our relationship, then I can't be responsible for what happens next. 2 p.m., Olivia. Don't make me come up there and get you. The voicemail ended, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. He just made a direct threat and set a specific time and location for contact, Morris said, her voice sharp with professional focus. This is perfect. We'll have units in position well before 2 p.m. The moment he shows up, we serve the restraining order and take him into custody for the threats he's made. What if he sees the police and runs? Olivia asked, her voice shaking. We'll have plainclothes officers positioned throughout the area. He won't see them until it's too late. Morris paused. Ms. Carter, I need you to stay inside your friend's apartment. Do not, under any circumstances, go down to that parking lot. Mr. Reed is attempting to isolate you, and we can't let that happen. I won't, Olivia promised. I'm not going anywhere near him. After Morris hung up with promises to call the moment they had Reed in custody, Daniel and Olivia sat in stunned silence. The clock on the microwave showed 12:03, less than 2 hours until Marcus's deadline. He called me sweetheart, Olivia said hollowly. After everything he's done, after terrorizing me for months, he still talks to me like I'm his girlfriend, like this is all just a misunderstanding we can work out. That's the delusion talking, Daniel said. He's built this entire fantasy in his head where you're the one being unreasonable, where he's the victim. It's textbook stalker psychology. I know, Olivia whispered. I know all of that intellectually. But hearing his voice again, hearing him sound so calm and rational while he's threatening me, it makes me feel crazy. Like maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I should just... No, Daniel interrupted sharply. That's exactly what he wants you to think. That's the manipulation, Olivia. He sounds reasonable while making completely unreasonable demands. He's threatening violence while calling you sweetheart. It's designed to make you doubt yourself. Olivia nodded, but Daniel could see the war happening behind her eyes. The battle between what she knew to be true and what years of Marcus's manipulation had trained her to feel. Talk to me, Daniel said gently. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about how it started, Olivia said quietly. How sweet he was at first. How he'd leave little notes on my car, send me flowers at work, remember every small detail I mentioned. I thought I'd found someone who really saw me, you know, someone who paid attention. And then it shifted, Daniel prompted. So gradually, I didn't even notice at first. The notes became more frequent, then constant. The flowers came with questions about why I hadn't called him during my lunch break. The attention became surveillance, but he always framed it as love, as caring, as wanting to be close to me. Olivia's hands twisted in her lap. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already isolated. He'd convinced me that my friends didn't understand our relationship, that my family was too judgmental, that he was the only one who really got me. And I believed him. That's what they do, Daniel said. They cut you off from everyone who might tell you the truth, who might help you see the situation clearly. When I finally ended it, when I told him I was done, he looked at me like I'd stabbed him. He cried, Daniel. Actually cried. Told me I was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me, that I'd regret it, that I'd come back to him once I realized how empty my life was without him. Olivia's voice was bitter, and for the first few weeks, part of me wondered if he was right, if I was making a mistake, if I was overreacting to normal relationship stuff. But you weren't, Daniel said firmly. No, I wasn't. The phone calls started, the emails, the showing up, and each time he'd act wounded that I wasn't happy to see him, like I was being cruel by not wanting to talk to him. Olivia looked up, meeting Daniel's eyes. That's why this is so hard. Because my gut instinct, the one he spent 8 months training, tells me that I should just go down there and talk to him, that 5 minutes of conversation would solve everything, that I'm being difficult by refusing. But your rational mind knows better, Daniel said. My rational mind is fighting with 4 months of his voice in my head telling me I'm wrong. Olivia stood abruptly, pacing to the window. And now he's threatening you and Emma, people who have nothing to do with this, people who are only involved because I knocked on your door asking for sugar I didn't need. People who chose to help you, Daniel corrected. And that choice is mine and Emma's, not yours. They fell into tense silence, both watching the clock as it ticked toward 2 p.m. At 1:30, Daniel's phone rang again. Morris. We're in position, the detective said. 6 units, all plainclothes, positioned throughout the parking lot and surrounding area. The moment Reed appears, we move in. But Mr. Hayes, I need you to understand something. There's a possibility this is a diversion, that Reed's real intention is to get everyone focused on the parking lot while he approaches from another angle. Like the apartment, Daniel said, his stomach dropping. Exactly. I've got a unit stationed in the building lobby, but I need you to be vigilant. Keep your door locked. Don't open it for anyone. And keep Miss Carter away from the windows." Daniel looked at Olivia, who was standing at the living room window, looking down at the parking lot. "Olivia, step back from the window, now." She turned, startled by the command in his voice, but complied. "What's wrong?" "Morris thinks the parking lot thing might be a fake-out, that Marcus might be planning to come up here instead." Daniel moved to the window himself, careful to stay to the side where he couldn't be seen from below. The parking lot was filling with the lunch hour crowd, people coming and going from their apartments. Any one of them could be Marcus. At 1:55, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "She's not coming down, is she? You've got her locked up in there. Fine, I'll come to you." "Morris," Daniel shouted into the phone, reading the text aloud. "He's coming up here." "Units are moving to the building now," Morris said, her voice sharp with urgency. "Lock your door. Do not open it for any reason. We're coming up." Daniel barely had time to engage the deadbolt before he heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, rapid footsteps that stopped right outside his door. A fist pounded against the wood, hard enough to rattle the frame. "Olivia!" Marcus's voice came through the door, tight with barely controlled rage. "I know you're in there. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Olivia had gone completely white, frozen in place near the couch. Daniel moved to stand between her and the door, his phone in one hand, the other instinctively clenched into a fist. "Olivia, please," Marcus continued, his voice shifting from anger to something that might have been desperation. "I drove 500 miles for you. I've done everything for you. The least you can do is talk to me. 5 minutes. Just open the door." "Police are in the building," Daniel said quietly to Olivia, who looked like she might pass out. "Just hold on. They'll be here any second." But Marcus wasn't waiting. The doorknob rattled violently as he tried to force it open. When that didn't work, his fists hammered against the door again. "I know he's in there with you. That mechanic." "You think he cares about you? He's just using you, Olivia. I'm the one who loves you. I'm the one who's always loved you." The pounding intensified, and Daniel could hear the doorframe beginning to strain. He pulled Olivia toward the hallway, toward Emma's room, putting more distance between them and whatever was about to happen. Then came the sound that changed everything. Booted footsteps thundering up the stairs, multiple voices shouting commands. "Portland Police! Marcus Reed, step away from the door. Get your hands where we can see them. Down on the ground. Now!" The pounding stopped. Through the door, Daniel could hear scuffling, Marcus's voice rising in protest. "I wasn't doing anything. I was just trying to talk to my girlfriend. This is harassment. You can't—" "You're under arrest for stalking, terroristic threatening, and attempted breaking and entering. You have the right to remain silent." The Miranda rights faded as Marcus was dragged away from the door, still protesting, still insisting that this was all a misunderstanding, that Olivia would tell them he was just trying to talk to her. Daniel's legs felt weak with relief. He reached out and engaged the chain lock with shaking hands, then turned to find Olivia sitting on the floor in the hallway, her back against the wall, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," he said quietly, sliding down to sit beside her. "He's in custody. It's over." But even as he said it, Daniel knew that wasn't quite true. Marcus was in custody, yes, but the psychological damage he'd inflicted, the fear he'd embedded in Olivia's bones, that would take much longer to heal. A knock came at the door, followed by Detective Morris's voice. "Mr. Hayes? Miss Carter? It's Detective Morris. Marcus Reed is in custody and on his way to the precinct. I need to speak with you both." Daniel stood, helping Olivia to her feet before opening the door. Morris stood in the hallway with 2 uniformed officers, her expression professional but not unsympathetic. "He's gone," she said simply, "and he's not getting out anytime soon. The charges we're filing, stalking across state lines, terroristic threatening, attempted forced entry. He's looking at serious prison time, even if he makes bail, which I doubt." "What happens now?" Olivia asked, her voice hoarse. "Now you press charges. Now we build the case. Now you get a permanent restraining order that follows him for the rest of his life." Morris stepped into the apartment, her eyes taking in the scene. The pulled-out couch where Olivia had been sleeping. The evidence of Daniel's efforts to make her comfortable and safe. "And now you start rebuilding your life without fear." The precinct's interview room felt colder the second time around. Or maybe it was just the adrenaline finally wearing off. Olivia sat across from Detective Morris with Daniel beside her, going through every detail of Marcus's assault on the apartment door. The messages, the voicemail, the months of escalating harassment. A victim advocate named Sarah Chen sat at the end of the table, taking notes and occasionally offering Olivia tissues when her voice broke. The search warrant on his hotel room turned up some concerning items, Morris said, sliding a folder across the table. I need to show you these, Ms. Carter. I know it won't be easy, but it's important for the case. Olivia opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photos of Marcus's hotel room, and what they revealed made Daniel's blood run cold. The walls were covered with printed photographs of Olivia, screenshots from her social media, pictures that looked like they'd been taken without her knowledge while she was out in public. There was a map of Portland with the Riverside apartment circled in red marker, along with what appeared to be a schedule noting when Olivia typically left and returned. But it was the notebook that made Olivia's face go ashen. Morris had included photographs of several pages filled with Marcus's handwriting. Daniel could read some of it from where he sat. Day 14. Still hasn't responded to my messages. She's being stubborn. The silent treatment won't work forever. Day 22. Found her building. Took some patience, but I knew she'd slip up eventually. She always does. 3rd floor, but haven't identified which apartment yet. Day 26. Saw her leaving with a man this morning. Tall, drives a beat-up truck. Works at some garage based on the uniform. Need to find out who he is. If she's moved on already, she'll need to understand that's not acceptable. He documented everything, Olivia whispered, her hand shaking so badly she nearly dropped the papers. He was planning this. For weeks. While I thought I was safe, while I was trying to start over, he was... She couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah Chen reached over and gently took the folder from Olivia's hands. This is actually good evidence, she said softly. I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but this level of documentation proves premeditation. It proves the stalking was deliberate and sustained. The prosecutor is going to have a very strong case. There's more, Morris said, pulling out another set of photos. We found these in his car. The images showed rope, duct tape, and a knife with a 6-inch blade. Olivia made a small, wounded sound and pressed her hand to her mouth. We believe he was preparing for an abduction scenario, Morris continued, her voice clinical but not unkind. If he'd managed to get you alone, he would have taken me, Olivia finished hollowly. He would have forced me into his car and driven me somewhere, and... She stood abruptly, swaying slightly. I need air, I need to... Daniel was on his feet immediately, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. We need a minute, he told Morris. Of course. Take your time. Daniel guided Olivia out of the interview room and down the hallway to a small waiting area with windows overlooking the street. She sank into one of the plastic chairs, her breathing rapid and shallow. Put your head between your knees, Daniel instructed gently, crouching in front of her. You're hyperventilating. Just breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. It took several minutes for Olivia's breathing to return to normal. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were red-rimmed but clearer. I could have died, she said quietly, if I hadn't knocked on your door that night, if I'd stayed alone in my apartment, if you hadn't helped me. He would have eventually figured out which apartment was mine, and he would have. But he didn't, Daniel said firmly. You're safe. He's in custody, and he's going to stay there. You don't know that, Olivia said. What if he makes bail? What if he gets out and... Then we deal with it, Daniel interrupted. But Morris said it's unlikely. The charges are serious, and he's a flight risk with no ties to Oregon. The judge will take that into account. Olivia leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. I spent 8 months with him. 8 months sleeping next to someone who was capable of... She gestured helplessly toward the interview room. How did I not see it? How did I convince myself that what he was doing was love? Because he's good at what he does, Daniel said. Guys like Marcus, they're experts at manipulation. They study you, learn what you respond to, what makes you feel valued. Then they use that knowledge to control you. It's not your fault you didn't see it, Olivia. It's his fault for being a predator. My parents are going to want to come here, Olivia said suddenly, when they find out what happened. My mom's going to blame herself for not seeing the signs, and my dad's going to want to hunt Marcus down himself. When's the last time you talked to them? 2 weeks ago. I've been avoiding their calls because I didn't want to worry them, didn't want to admit I was in trouble again. Olivia's laugh was bitter. They helped me leave my first serious relationship when I was 23. He wasn't violent, just controlling, emotionally manipulative. They were so relieved when I finally ended it. And then I went and found Marcus, who was all of that times 100. What does that say about me? It says you're human, Daniel replied. It says you wanted to be loved, and you trusted someone who didn't deserve that trust. That's not a character flaw, Olivia. That's just bad luck. Bad luck, she repeated softly. Is that what you call it when you end up in a police station looking at photos of the rope someone planned to tie you up with? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he pulled out his phone and checked the time. 2:45. Emma would be getting out of school in less than an hour. We should finish up with Morris so I can pick up Emma, he said. You ready to go back in? Olivia took a deep breath and nodded. Yeah, let's get this over with. They spent another hour going through details, signing statements, and discussing the timeline for the court case. The prosecutor would be seeking charges of stalking, terroristic threatening, attempted kidnapping based on the materials in Marcus's car, and criminal trespass. Bail would be set at the arraignment tomorrow morning, and Morris was confident it would be high enough that Marcus wouldn't make it. What about a permanent restraining order? Sarah Chen asked. The temporary one is in effect now that he's been served, but we should file for a permanent order. Already drafted, Morris said, sliding paperwork across the table. Judge can sign off on this within 48 hours given the circumstances. Once it's permanent, any contact, direct or indirect, is a felony violation. By the time they left the precinct, Olivia looked exhausted, her face pale and drawn. Daniel drove to Emma's school in silence, Olivia staring out the window at the passing scenery like she was seeing it for the first time. I should probably start looking for a new place to live, she said suddenly. I can't stay at the Riverside Apartments, not after everything. Even with Marcus locked up, I'll never feel safe there. You don't have to make those decisions right now, Daniel said. Give yourself time to process before you start planning your next move. And in the meantime, I keep sleeping on your couch, keep disrupting your life and Emma's routine. Olivia shook her head. You've already done so much, Daniel. I can't keep... Stop, Daniel interrupted, pulling into the school parking lot. We'll figure it out. But not today. Today you just survived something traumatic. Give yourself permission to just breathe for a minute before you start solving the next problem. Emma bounded out of the school entrance when she spotted Daniel's truck, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She climbed into the back seat with her usual enthusiasm, then noticed Olivia's pale face. Did something bad happen? She asked, her voice losing its cheerful tone. The police caught the person who was bothering Olivia, Daniel explained carefully. He's not going to bother her anymore, but it was scary and Olivia's still feeling a little shaky. So let's give her some quiet time, okay? Okay, Emma said solemnly. Then, after a moment of consideration, she reached forward and patted Olivia's shoulder with her small hand. My dad always says that after something scary, it helps to have hot chocolate. We could make some when we get home. Despite everything, Olivia smiled. That sounds perfect, Emma. At the apartment, Daniel made good on Emma's suggestion while Olivia curled up on the couch with a blanket Emma had insisted she needed. His daughter sat beside her, chattering about her day in the gentle, distracting way that only children could manage, somehow knowing exactly what was needed without being told. Daniel's phone buzzed with a call from his mother just as he was pouring the hot chocolate. Hey, Mom. I'm outside your building. Buzz me up. You didn't have to come over. I saw the police cars on the news, Patricia interrupted. Riverside Apartments, they said. Active arrest situation. So yes, I absolutely had to come over. Buzz me up, Daniel. When Patricia arrived, she took one look at Olivia's face and immediately shifted into the same caretaking mode she'd used when Daniel was young and hurting. All right, she said, setting down her purse with purposeful efficiency. Emma, honey, let's you and I work on your homework in your room while your dad talks to Olivia. Come on, sweetheart. Emma looked reluctant to leave Olivia's side, but she obeyed her grandmother, casting one last concerned glance back before disappearing down the hallway. Once they were alone, Daniel handed Olivia the mug of hot chocolate and sat in the armchair across from her. You want to talk about it? There's not much to talk about, Olivia said tiredly. Marcus is in jail. I'm safe. Everything worked out the way it was supposed to, but her hands were shaking as she lifted the mug to her lips. You saw what he had in that hotel room, Daniel said gently. The photos. The planning. You're allowed to be affected by that, Olivia. You're allowed to be scared. I'm terrified, Olivia admitted, her voice cracking. I'm terrified that he'll make bail. I'm terrified that even if he doesn't, he'll find some way to get to me. I'm terrified that this isn't actually over, that it's just paused, and I'm... She stopped, pressing her lips together like she was physically holding back the words. And you're what? I'm terrified of what happens next, she whispered. When the immediate crisis is over, and I have to figure out how to live a normal life again, how to trust people, how to not jump every time someone knocks on my door or sends me a text message, how to feel safe anywhere. Daniel set down his own mug and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. It's going to take time, he said, and it's not going to be linear. Some days you'll feel okay, and some days you'll feel like you're right back in that moment when he was pounding on the door. That's normal. That's how trauma works. How do you know so much about this? Olivia asked, studying his face. My ex-wife's sister, Daniel said. She was in an abusive relationship for 3 years. When she finally left, she stayed with us for a few months. I watched her go through exactly what you're describing. The fear, the hypervigilance, the wondering if she'd ever feel normal again. It took her almost a year of therapy and a whole support system before she started to feel like herself. And does she feel like herself? She does now, Daniel said. She's married to a good guy, has 2 kids, works as a teacher, but she still has moments, certain triggers that bring it all back. The difference is she's learned how to manage them instead of being controlled by them. Olivia absorbed this in silence, staring into her hot chocolate. I should probably find a therapist, she said finally, someone who specializes in this kind of thing. Sarah Chen gave you some referrals, right? Yeah, I've got a list. Olivia set down her mug. Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay? Do you regret it? Opening your door that night? Getting involved in all of this? Daniel didn't hesitate. No, not for a second. Even though it put Emma in danger? Even though Marcus threatened your daughter? Marcus made that choice, not you, Daniel said firmly. And honestly, I'm glad I was here. I'm glad you weren't facing this alone. Because if you had been, he stopped, not wanting to voice the alternative ending that had been documented in Marcus's hotel room. If I had been alone, he would have gotten to me eventually, Olivia finished quietly. I know that. The police know that. Detective Morris said the materials in his car, the planning. He was building up to making a move. Maybe not that day, but soon. They sat in heavy silence for a moment before Olivia spoke again. I keep thinking about something Sarah Chen said, about how I get to start rebuilding my life without fear. And I realized I don't even know what that looks like anymore. I've been afraid for so long that I don't remember what it feels like to just exist without constantly looking over my shoulder. You'll remember, Daniel said. It'll come back gradually. Small moments at first, going to get coffee without checking who's behind you, sleeping through the night without waking up to check your phone. It builds from there. I want to believe that, Olivia said. I really do. But right now, sitting here, I can't imagine ever feeling truly safe again. Even knowing he's locked up, even knowing there's a restraining order and criminal charges, part of me is just waiting for the other shoe to drop. From Emma's room, they could hear Patricia's voice reading aloud, something about a girl and a dragon. The domesticity of it, the normalcy, felt jarring against the weight of their conversation. Can I ask you something? Olivia said. And you can tell me if I'm overstepping. Go ahead. Why are you so good at this? At helping people, at knowing exactly what to say? Most people would have called the police that first night and washed their hands of the situation. But you didn't. You brought me into your home, installed locks, went with me to file reports, let me sleep on your couch. Why? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. When I was 12, he finally said, my dad and I were driving home from a construction site where he'd been working. We came across an accident. Car had gone off the road into a ditch. Dad pulled over immediately, told me to call 911 while he went to check on the driver. Turned out it was a woman who'd been trying to leave her abusive husband. He'd been chasing her, forced her off the road, and then driven away when he realized someone might see. What happened to her? Olivia asked. Dad stayed with her until the ambulance came. She had a broken arm, some cuts and bruises, but she was alive. Could have been a lot worse if she'd been out there much longer. It was winter, temperature dropping fast. Daniel's expression was distant, remembering. On the drive home, I asked my dad why he stopped. We were already late for dinner and Mom was going to be annoyed. And he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, "When you see someone who needs help, you don't calculate the cost of helping them against the inconvenience to yourself. You just help, because someday you might be the one who needs helping, and you'll hope someone makes the same choice." "Your dad sounds like he was a good man," Olivia said softly. "He was. Died of a heart attack when I was 19. Never got to meet Emma." Daniel's voice was rough with old grief. "But everything he taught me about being a decent human being stuck. So when you showed up at my door asking for sugar you didn't need, I didn't think about whether it was convenient or safe or smart. I just thought about what my dad would have done, and I knew he would have helped." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I wish I could thank him for raising someone who lives by those principles, who acts on them instead of just talking about them." "He'd probably just say I was doing what anyone should do," Daniel said with a slight smile. He wasn't big on taking credit for basic human decency. Patricia emerged from Emma's room, leaving the door cracked so they could hear if Emma needed anything. She studied both of them with her sharp, assessing gaze before speaking. "Emma's working on her reading assignment. She'll be occupied for a bit." She turned to Olivia. "I don't know all the details of what happened today, but I know my son, and I know that look on his face. So I'm going to ask you straight. Are you safe now?" "The person who is threatening me is in jail," Olivia said. "So yes, I think so." "You think so or you know so?" Patricia pressed. "I know so," Olivia amended, though her voice wavered slightly on the words. Patricia nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Now, let's talk practical matters. You're staying here for the foreseeable future, I assume?" "Mom?" Daniel started. "I'm not asking you, I'm asking her," Patricia interrupted, her eyes still on Olivia. "Are you staying here where there's someone who can help if you need it, or are you planning to go back to your apartment alone?" "I don't want to impose," Olivia began. "That's not what I asked. I asked where you're staying." Olivia glanced at Daniel, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. "Here," she said. "If Daniel's okay with it, I'd like to stay here for a while longer." "Of course I'm okay with it," Daniel said. "Good," Patricia said briskly. "Then we need to make this arrangement more livable. That pull-out couch is fine for a night or two, but not for extended stays. Emma's room has space for a second bed. We can set up a proper guest area. And Olivia, you'll need access to the kitchen, the bathroom, all of it without feeling like you're intruding. This isn't a temporary shelter situation. This is you living here until you feel safe enough to make other arrangements." "Mrs. Hayes, I can't ask you all to—" "You're not asking. We're offering. There's a difference." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "I raised Daniel to help people who need it. Means I'm responsible for the chaos that comes with that character trait. So we're going to make this work properly, not half-measure it." Over the next hour, Patricia took charge with the kind of efficiency that came from years of managing a household and raising a child largely on her own after her husband's death. She made lists of what Olivia would need, discussed logistics of bathroom scheduling and kitchen access, and generally transformed the vague arrangement of staying on the couch into an actual plan for cohabitation. "I'm going to bring over a small dresser tomorrow," Patricia announced, "and some proper hangers for the closet space Daniel's clearing out. You'll need your own towels, toiletries, all of that. Make a list of anything you need from your apartment, and Daniel can go with you to get it this weekend." "I can just buy new stuff," Olivia protested weakly. "Why, when you've already got perfectly good things in your apartment?" Patricia countered. "Don't waste money out of some misguided sense that you need to minimize your presence here. You're staying. You might as well be comfortable." By the time Patricia left, after making dinner for all of them and ensuring Emma understood that Olivia would be staying with them for a while, the apartment felt different, more settled, like the emergency had transformed into something more permanent and manageable. Emma, for her part, seemed thrilled with the arrangement. "It's like having a big sister," she told Olivia as they cleared the dinner dishes together. "I've always wanted a sister. I've always wanted a little sister too," Olivia said, and Daniel could hear the genuine warmth in her voice. "Looks like we both got lucky." That night, after Emma was in bed and the apartment had settled into quiet, Daniel found Olivia standing at the living room window, looking out at the parking lot below. The black Audi was gone. towed as evidence, but she stared at the empty space where it had been. "Can't sleep?" Daniel asked quietly. "Keep expecting to see him down there," Olivia admitted. "Even knowing he's in jail, part of my brain is still in survival mode, still watching for threats." "That'll fade," Daniel said. "Not overnight, but it will fade." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've seen it happen. Because trauma doesn't last forever, even though it feels like it will when you're in the middle of it." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "You're safe, Olivia. For real this time. Not just hoping you're safe or trying to convince yourself you're safe. Actually, genuinely safe." "It doesn't feel real yet," she said quietly. "None of it does. 3 days ago, I was alone and terrified, convinced I'd made a terrible mistake moving here. And now She gestured around the apartment. "I'm living with you and Emma. Your mother's bringing over furniture tomorrow. I'm part of your lives in a way I never expected to be." "Sometimes life changes direction fast," Daniel said. "Not always for the worse." Olivia turned to look at him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "What happens when this is really over? When the trial's done and Marcus is in prison and I don't need protection anymore? What happens to—" She gestured between them. "This?" "I don't know," Daniel said honestly, "but we don't have to figure that out tonight. Tonight, we just need to get through tonight." "One day at a time," Olivia said, echoing his earlier words. "Exactly." She turned back to the window, and they stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the quiet street below. Finally, Olivia spoke again. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything, for opening your door that night, for believing me, for not making me face this alone." "You don't have to thank me," Daniel said, "but you're welcome." After Olivia had settled onto the pull-out bed and Daniel had retreated to his own room, he lay awake thinking about her question. What happens when this is really over? It was a good question, one he didn't have an answer to, because somewhere in the chaos of the last few days, Olivia had become more than just someone he was helping. She'd become someone he looked forward to seeing in the morning, someone whose smile made something warm settle in his chest, someone who fit into his and Emma's life with surprising ease. But that was dangerous territory, complicated territory. Olivia was dealing with trauma, with the aftermath of a stalker's obsession. The last thing she needed was someone else developing feelings for her, adding pressure and expectation when she was just trying to survive. So Daniel would keep those thoughts to himself. He'd continue being what Olivia needed him to be, a friend, a safe harbor, someone she could count on without complications. And if that meant setting aside whatever else he might be starting to feel, then that's what he'd do. In the living room, Olivia lay awake on the pull-out bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking remarkably similar thoughts. About Daniel's kindness and competence, about the way Emma looked at her with such uncomplicated trust, about how for the first time in months she'd felt genuinely safe, not because Marcus was in jail, but because she was here, in this apartment, with these people who'd chosen to care about what happened to her. It was too soon to examine those feelings too closely, too complicated with everything else she was dealing with. But they were there, undeniable, settling into her chest like seeds that might someday grow into something more. Outside, the city settled into its late-night rhythm. The Riverside apartment stood quiet under the streetlights, its residents unaware of the drama that had unfolded in their midst. And in apartment 2B, two people lay awake in separate rooms, both wondering what the future might hold, both afraid to hope for something more than survival. But hope, like seeds, has a way of growing even in the darkest soil. And sometimes, the most unexpected moments of crisis become the foundation for something better than what came before. The days that followed Marcus's arrest settled into a rhythm that was almost normal, if normal could include prosecutor meetings, therapy appointments, and the constant awareness that a court case loomed on the horizon. Olivia started seeing Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a trauma specialist Sarah Chen had recommended, twice a week. Patricia made good on her promise and arrived with a dresser, proper bedding, and enough organizational supplies to transform the corner of Daniel's living room into something that felt less temporary and more like home. Emma adapted to the new arrangement with the resilience of childhood, treating Olivia's presence as a natural extension of their family rather than an intrusion. She'd started a habit of doing her homework at the kitchen table while Olivia worked on her laptop, the two of them existing in comfortable silence punctuated by occasional questions about fractions or requests for opinions on social media campaigns. 2 weeks after Marcus's arrest, Daniel came home from the garage to find Olivia and Emma in the kitchen making cookies, flour dusting both of their faces and laughter filling the apartment in a way it hadn't since before his divorce. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his keys and fighting back a smile at the chaos. "Olivia's teaching me to make chocolate chip cookies from scratch," Emma announced proudly. "The real way, not from the tube in the refrigerator." "The tube cookies are perfectly fine," Daniel protested mildly. "But these are better," Olivia said, sliding a tray into the oven. "Your daughter has informed me that you've been depriving her of homemade baked goods her entire life." "I wouldn't say deprived," Emma corrected seriously, "but definitely missing out." Daniel shook his head, warmth spreading through his chest at the domestic scene. This was what normal looked like, he realized. This ease, this comfort, this sense of rightness that came from seeing two people he cared about happy together. The thought stopped him short. Two people he cared about. When had Olivia moved from someone he was helping to someone he cared about? When had the protective instinct transformed into something deeper, more complicated? "Dad, you're staring," Emma observed. "Are you okay?" "Fine," Daniel said quickly. "Just tired. Long day at the garage." But Olivia was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, and he wondered if she'd caught something in his face that he hadn't meant to show. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed with a stomachache from eating too many cookies, Olivia and Daniel cleaned up the kitchen together. They'd developed an unspoken system over the past 2 weeks. He washed, she dried, and they talked about small things that didn't carry the weight of court cases or trauma. "Emma told me about her science fair project today," Olivia said, drying a mixing bowl. "Something about plant growth and different types of soil?" "Yeah, we've got to start working on that this weekend. She wants to prove that plants grow better in composted soil versus regular dirt." Daniel handed her a baking sheet. "Fair warning, it's going to involve a lot of dirt in the apartment. I can help if you want. I did pretty well in science back in school." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Olivia interrupted gently. "I want to." Emma's excited about it, and honestly, it would be nice to think about something other than... She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything they'd been dealing with. "You know." "The trial's in 3 weeks," Daniel said quietly. "You ready for that?" Olivia was silent for a moment, her hand stilling on the dish towel. "Dr. Walsh says I'm as ready as I can be. The prosecutor walked me through what to expect, what Marcus's lawyer might try to ask, how to handle cross-examination. But knowing what to expect and actually doing it are different things." "You don't have to face it alone," Daniel reminded her. "I'll be there. So will Detective Morris and Sarah Chen, and your parents are flying in for it, right?" "Yeah, they arrived 2 days before. They're insisting on staying at a hotel, but I think they're mostly coming to make sure I'm okay. And to meet you." Olivia glanced at him. "They're grateful, by the way, for everything you've done. My mom cried when I told her about how you helped me." "You told them everything?" "Most of it. Left out some of the scarier parts. They don't need to know about the rope and duct tape in Marcus's car, but they know you opened your door to a stranger and let me into your life when I had nowhere else to turn." She set down the towel and turned to face him fully. "They want to thank you in person. Fair warning, my mother will probably try to feed you. She expresses gratitude through food." "Sounds like she and my mom have that in common," Daniel said with a slight smile. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence, but Daniel could feel the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. It had been building over the past 2 weeks. Small moments of hands brushing while passing dishes, lingering looks across the dinner table, conversations that stretched late into the night after Emma had gone to sleep. The awareness that something was shifting between them, becoming something neither of them had quite acknowledged out loud. "Daniel," Olivia said as he was hanging up the dish towel, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What happens after the trial? After Marcus is sentenced and this is all really, truly over?" She was watching him with an intensity that made his heart rate pick up. "I've been here for 2 weeks, and we haven't really talked about what comes next, for me, for this arrangement." Daniel leaned against the counter, choosing his words carefully. "What do you want to happen?" "That's not fair," Olivia said softly. "I asked you first." "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "I know what I should want. I should want you to find your own place, rebuild your independence, move forward with your life without a constant reminder of what happened. That would be the healthy thing, the right thing. But, Olivia prompted when he trailed off, but the selfish part of me doesn't want that, Daniel said, the words coming out before he could stop them. The selfish part of me has gotten used to having you here, to coming home and seeing you at the kitchen table working, to watching you help Emma with her homework, to these conversations we have after she goes to bed. He met her eyes. The selfish part of me isn't ready for this to end. Olivia's breath caught slightly. That's not selfish, isn't it? You're dealing with trauma, Olivia. You're rebuilding your sense of safety and self. The last thing you need is me complicating things by... He stopped himself, uncertain how to finish that sentence without crossing a line he couldn't uncross. By caring about me? Olivia finished quietly. By making me feel like maybe this arrangement isn't just about safety and protection anymore. The air between them felt charged, heavy, with possibility and risk. Daniel knew he should step back, should maintain the boundary of helpful friend and nothing more. But Olivia was looking at him like she was waiting for something, like she needed him to be honest, even if that honesty was complicated. I do care about you, Daniel said finally. More than I probably should, given the circumstances. But I'm not going to act on that, Olivia. Not now. Not when you're still processing everything that happened. That wouldn't be fair to you. What if I wanted you to? Olivia asked, moving closer. What if I've been thinking about this too? About what happens after? About whether this thing between us is just gratitude and proximity or something more? Then I'd say we should wait, Daniel said, even as everything in him wanted to close the distance between them. Wait until after the trial. Wait until you've had time to heal and figure out who you are without fear driving your decisions. If what you're feeling is real, if what I'm feeling is real, it'll still be there in a few months. And if it's not, Olivia whispered, then we'll both know it was just the intensity of the situation, and we can move forward as friends. Daniel forced himself to step back, to create physical distance, even though it felt like the hardest thing he'd done. You're worth waiting for, Olivia. You're worth doing this the right way. Olivia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You're a good man, Daniel Hayes. Better than I deserve. You deserve someone who puts your healing first, Daniel said firmly. Even when it's hard. Even when we both might want something different. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and restraint. Finally, Olivia nodded. Okay. After the trial. We'll revisit this conversation after the trial. After the trial, Daniel agreed. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. Olivia met with the prosecutor multiple times, going over her testimony until she could recite it in her sleep. Her parents arrived. Her mother, Linda, exactly as advertised, showing up at Daniel's apartment with enough food to feed them for a week, and tearful gratitude that made Daniel uncomfortable in the way that sincere praise always did. Her father, Robert, was quieter, but no less grateful, shaking Daniel's hand with the kind of grip that conveyed everything words couldn't. You kept our daughter safe, Robert said simply. That's a debt we can't repay. I didn't do it for repayment, Daniel replied. I did it because it was right. Emma charmed Olivia's parents within minutes, showing them her dinosaur book and explaining with great seriousness about the feather controversy. Linda watched her granddaughter, aged young girl with soft eyes, and Daniel caught her whispering to Olivia, "She's wonderful. They both are." The trial began on a Tuesday morning in late October. Daniel had taken the week off from the garage, and Patricia had arranged to keep Emma occupied and shielded from the worst of it. The courthouse was an imposing building of gray stone and glass, and Olivia's hand trembled slightly as they climbed the steps. "You've got this," Daniel said quietly, his hand at the small of her back in a gesture of support. "Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do." The courtroom was smaller than Daniel had expected, the wood paneling and fluorescent lights giving it an oddly mundane quality despite the weight of what was happening. Marcus sat at the defense table with his lawyer, and when Olivia entered, his eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made Daniel's jaw clench. But Olivia held her head high, refusing to look away first. It was Marcus who finally broke eye contact, and Daniel felt a surge of pride at her strength. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The messages, the voicemails, the photographs from Marcus's hotel room, the materials in his car. Detective Morris testified about the arrest, about Marcus's behavior when confronted. Sarah Chen spoke about the psychological impact of sustained stalking. And then it was Olivia's turn. She took the stand with visible nerves but growing confidence, and Daniel watched as she transformed from the terrified woman who'd knocked on his door asking for sugar into someone stronger, someone who'd survived and was determined to make sure her survival mattered. "Can you describe the defendant's behavior after you ended the relationship?" the prosecutor asked. Olivia's voice was steady. "At first, he sent messages saying he understood, that he just wanted me to be happy. But within a week, the messages changed. They became more frequent, more insistent. He started showing up at my apartment, at my work. When I blocked his number, he'd call from different phones. When I threatened legal action, he'd disappear for a while, then resurface like nothing had happened. And when you moved to Portland? I thought I'd escaped. For 3 weeks, I heard nothing. I started to believe I was safe." Olivia's hands gripped the edge of the witness box. "Then the messages started again. He'd found me somehow, tracked me across 2 states. He knew my building, knew I'd moved. And the messages, they got darker, more threatening." The prosecutor displayed the messages on a screen for the jury to see. Daniel watched their faces as they read Marcus's words, saw the disgust and concern that flickered across their expressions. "What happened the day of the defendant's arrest?" the prosecutor continued. Olivia described it all: the voicemail, the deadline, the pounding on Daniel's door. Her voice wavered slightly when she talked about the materials found in Marcus's car, about realizing what he'd been planning. "He was going to take me," she said quietly. "If he'd gotten the chance, if I'd been alone, he would have forced me into his car and—" She stopped, composing herself. "I would have disappeared." The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal but expected. He tried to paint Olivia as someone who'd misunderstood Marcus's intentions, who'd overreacted to normal relationship behavior, who'd led his client on and then cruelly cut him off. But Olivia held firm. "I said no," she repeated calmly. "I ended the relationship clearly and definitively. Everything that happened after that was his choice, not mine. I don't care how he felt about me or what he thought we had. No means no, and his inability to accept that doesn't make his behavior acceptable." By the time she stepped down from the witness stand, Daniel could see the exhaustion in her face, but also something else. Relief. The unburdening that came from speaking truth out loud, from making Marcus's private terrorism a matter of public record. Daniel testified next, describing the night Olivia had knocked on his door, the escalating messages, Marcus's threat against Emma. The defense attorney tried to suggest he'd misunderstood the situation, that he'd inserted himself into a private matter. "There was nothing private about it," Daniel said flatly. "A man was stalking a woman across state lines. That's not a private matter. That's a crime." The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts: stalking, terroristic threatening, attempted kidnapping, criminal trespass. Marcus's face went pale as the verdicts were read, his lawyer immediately filing notice of appeal, even as the judge set a sentencing date for 2 weeks out. Outside the courthouse, Olivia stood in the autumn sunshine with her parents on either side of her, and Daniel just behind. "It's over," she said wonderingly. "It's actually over." "Not quite," Robert cautioned. "There's still sentencing and the appeal process, but the guilty verdict stands," Olivia interrupted. "A jury of 12 people heard what he did and said it was wrong, that it was criminal. That matters, Dad. That really matters." Linda pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, and Daniel stepped back to give them space. Detective Morris approached, her expression professionally satisfied. "The prosecutor is recommending maximum sentencing," she told them. "Given the interstate nature of the stalking, the premeditation evidenced by the hotel room, and the materials in his car, she's pushing for 12 to 15 years. Judge Hendricks is tough on stalking cases. I'd be surprised if Reed gets less than 10. 10 years, Olivia breathed. That's enough time to rebuild my entire life." "That's the idea," Morris said with a slight smile. "You did good in there, Ms. Carter. You were credible, composed, and compelling. The jury believed you because you told the truth without embellishment. That matters more than you know." At sentencing 2 weeks later, Marcus finally spoke, making a rambling statement about how he'd only been trying to protect Olivia. how she'd needed him even if she didn't realize it, how the real crime was the way the system had prevented him from being with the woman he loved. The judge cut him off midway through, her expression stern. Mr. Reed, what you describe as love is actually obsession and control. You terrorized Miss Carter for months, tracked her across state lines, and were preparing to abduct her when you were apprehended. The evidence suggests you have no understanding of your victim's autonomy or right to refuse your attention. I am sentencing you to 12 years in state prison, with a permanent restraining order to take effect upon your release. You are to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Miss Carter for the remainder of your life. If you violate this order upon release, you will return to prison. Do you understand? Marcus's jaw worked silently before he managed a tight, "Yes, Your Honor." As the bailiff led Marcus away, he looked back at Olivia one last time. But instead of the possessive intensity that had characterized his earlier stares, Daniel saw something else. Defeat. The final acceptance that he'd lost, that Olivia was never going to be his, that his obsession had cost him 12 years of his life. Olivia watched him go with dry eyes and a straight spine, her hand finding Daniel's and squeezing tight. Outside the courthouse for the final time, Olivia's parents announced they were staying in Portland for another week. "We want to help you find a place," Linda said. "Somewhere you can make a fresh start, build new memories." "Actually," Olivia said, glancing at Daniel, "I've been thinking about that, and I'm not sure I want to move right away. Daniel and Emma and we've built something over these past 2 months, something that feels like family, and I'm not ready to give that up yet, if they'll have me." Emma, who'd been allowed to skip school for the sentencing, lit up immediately. "You want to stay with us?" "If it's okay with your dad," Olivia said, her eyes on Daniel. Daniel's heart was pounding, but he kept his voice steady. "We said we'd revisit this conversation after the trial. I think we should probably have that conversation in private before making any big announcements." "Right," Olivia said, but she was smiling. "Private conversation first, then announcements." That evening, after Olivia's parents had returned to their hotel and Emma had been put to bed with promises of a special breakfast tomorrow to celebrate, Daniel and Olivia found themselves alone in the apartment for the first time since their interrupted conversation weeks earlier. "So," Daniel said, settling into his usual spot in the armchair, "the trial's over. Marcus is in prison. You're safe." "I'm safe," Olivia agreed, curling up on the couch. "Really, truly safe, for the first time in months. Which means you can make decisions based on what you want, not what you're afraid of," Daniel continued. "You can figure out what comes next without fear driving those choices." "I can," Olivia said, "and I have been. In therapy, I've been working through a lot of stuff, not just about Marcus, but about patterns in my life, about what I want versus what I think I should want. And Dr. Walsh helped me realize something important." "What's that?" "That healing doesn't mean going back to who I was before Marcus. It means becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone who knows her own worth and won't compromise it for anyone." Olivia leaned forward, her expression earnest. "And part of that new person is someone who's learned the difference between someone who wants to control me and someone who wants to support me, between someone who isolates me and someone who integrates me into his life and his daughter's life, between obsession and actual genuine care." "Olivia," Daniel started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. I know you said we should wait, and you were right. I needed this time to process, to heal, to figure out if what I was feeling was real or just trauma bonding or gratitude. And I've done that work, Daniel. For 2 months I've been doing that work. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that what I feel for you isn't gratitude. It's not trauma. It's not proximity or convenience." "What is it?" Daniel asked quietly. "It's love," Olivia said simply. "I love the way you are with Emma, the way you teach her to help people without expecting anything in return. I love how you fixed my locks before I even asked, how you stood between me and danger without hesitation. I love our late-night conversations, and the way you make me laugh even on hard days. I love that you put my healing first even when it meant denying what we both wanted. And I love—" her voice broke slightly. "I love how you make me feel safe, not because you control my environment, but because you respect my autonomy while still being there when I need you." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for weeks finally releasing. "I was so afraid to tell you," he admitted. "Afraid you'd think I had ulterior motives for helping you, that I'd been waiting for you to be vulnerable enough to take advantage?" Olivia finished. "Daniel, you've had months to do that, if that's what you wanted. Instead, you've given me space, time, and support with absolutely no expectations. That's the opposite of taking advantage." "I love you too," Daniel said, the words feeling both terrifying and right. "I've been in love with you for weeks, maybe longer. But I needed to know you were choosing this, choosing me, from a place of strength, not fear or need." "I am," Olivia said firmly. "I'm choosing you from the strongest place I've ever been, because you helped me find that strength, Daniel. You and Emma both." Daniel crossed the space between them, kneeling in front of the couch and taking her hands in his. "So, what do we do now? How do we do this right?" "We take it slow," Olivia said. "We keep talking, keep being honest with each other. We make sure Emma's okay with this change. And we build something real, something healthy, something that has nothing to do with stalkers or fear or trauma." "I can do slow," Daniel said, reaching up to cup her face gently. "But can I kiss you? Because I've been wanting to do that for about 6 weeks now." "Yes," Olivia whispered. "Please, yes." The kiss was soft and careful, full of promise rather than passion, the beginning of something rather than the culmination. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "We should probably talk to Emma tomorrow," Olivia said. "Make sure she understands what this means, that she's comfortable with it." "She's going to be thrilled," Daniel predicted. "She's been asking me when you're going to officially become part of our family. 7-year-olds aren't subtle." "Neither is your mother," Olivia pointed out. "She told me last week that I was good for you and Emma, and that I should stop overthinking things." "That sounds like Mom," Daniel said with a laugh. He stood, pulling Olivia up with him. "Come on, let's get some sleep. Tomorrow we start figuring out what comes next." The conversation with Emma the next morning went exactly as Daniel had predicted. His daughter looked between them with knowing eyes and said, "So you're in love now? Like really in love, not just friend love?" "Yes," Olivia said, glancing at Daniel for confirmation. "Is that okay with you?" Emma considered this with the seriousness she applied to all important questions. "Will you still help me with my homework?" "Of course," Olivia said. "And make cookies with me?" "Absolutely." "And live here with us?" "If that's okay with you and your dad, then yes." Emma nodded, satisfied. "Then it's okay. I like you being here. It feels right." She paused, then added, "Can I call you Olivia, or should I call you something else?" "What would you want to call me?" Olivia asked gently. "I don't know. You're kind of like a mom, but you're not my mom. Sarah's my mom. But you're—" Emma struggled for words. "You're my Olivia. That's what you are." "You're Olivia," Olivia repeated, her eyes glistening. "I like that. That feels perfect." Over the following months, they settled into a new normal that bore little resemblance to the crisis that had brought them together. Olivia officially moved out of her apartment at the Riverside complex and into Daniel's place, transforming what had been a temporary arrangement into something permanent. They cleared out half of Daniel's closet for her clothes, added her name to the mailbox, and slowly merged their lives in the 1,000 small ways that defined a shared existence. Patricia watched it all with satisfaction, telling Daniel one evening that his father would have been proud. "You saw someone who needed help, and you helped her. And you both ended up better for it. That's how it's supposed to work." Olivia's therapy continued, the work of healing not magically concluded by Marcus's imprisonment, but ongoing and necessary. But she found that healing was easier when you had people around you who supported that growth rather than hindered it. Dr. Walsh noted in one of their sessions that Olivia had made remarkable progress, that she'd transformed trauma into strength rather than letting it define her. "That doesn't mean the trauma didn't happen," Dr. Walsh clarified, "or that it won't affect you. But you're not letting it be the only thing that happened. You're building a life that's bigger than what Marcus tried to reduce you to." By the time spring arrived, 6 months after that midnight knock on Daniel's door, they'd built something neither of them had expected. Emma's science fair project won second place, the display board featuring photos of her working on it with both Daniel and Olivia, a family effort captured in pictures. Olivia received a promotion at work, her confidence and creativity flourishing now that she wasn't expending all her energy on survival. And Daniel found that his life had become richer in ways he hadn't anticipated. Olivia understood his work, appreciated his skills, and never made him feel like caring about people was a weakness. She integrated seamlessly into his and Emma's routines while maintaining her own identity and independence. And on the hard days when old fears surfaced or nightmares woke her, he was there to remind her she was safe, she was loved, and she was never going to be alone again. One evening in late April, they stood together on the small balcony of Daniel's apartment, watching the sunset paint the Portland sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma was at Patricia's for a sleepover, giving them a rare evening alone. "I've been thinking about something," Olivia said, leaning against the railing. "About that night I knocked on your door asking for sugar." "What about it?" Daniel asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. "I think about what would have happened if you'd just given me the sugar and sent me back upstairs. If you'd believed the excuse instead of seeing through it. If you'd decided it wasn't your problem." She turned to face him. "My whole life would be different. I might not even be alive." "But I didn't send you away," Daniel said firmly. "And you are alive. And we're here, together, building something good out of something that started terribly." "I know. And I'm grateful every single day for your inability to mind your own business," Olivia said with a slight smile. "But I also think about all the other people out there who knock on doors asking for sugar they don't need. And how many of those doors stay closed? How many people don't get lucky the way I got lucky?" "Where are you going with this?" Daniel asked. "I want to do something," Olivia said. "With my story, with what happened. I've been talking to Sarah Chen about maybe volunteering with the domestic violence unit, helping other women who are going through what I went through. Being someone who can say, 'I survived this, and you can too.'" "That's a great idea," Daniel said, pride swelling in his chest. "You'd be amazing at that. And I was thinking maybe we could do something together too. You and me. Maybe teach self-defense classes or run workshops on recognizing the warning signs of controlling behavior. Use our experience to help other people." Olivia's expression was earnest. "I don't want what happened to me to just be this awful thing I survived. I want it to mean something. I want it to help people." "Then let's do it," Daniel said without hesitation. "Let's turn your survival into someone else's survival guide." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights begin to flicker on as dusk deepened into night. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "I have something I want to ask you." "Okay," Olivia said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Daniel pulled a small box from his pocket, and Olivia's breath caught. "I know it's only been 6 months since the trial ended. I know we said we'd take things slow. But Olivia, I've loved you from almost the beginning, and I can't imagine my life without you in it. You've become Emma's Olivia and my Olivia, and this family wouldn't be complete without you." He opened the box to reveal a simple diamond ring. "So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you make this official? Will you let me spend the rest of my life being the person who opens the door when you need help, who stands beside you when things get hard, who loves you exactly as you are?" Tears were streaming down Olivia's face, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes. Though technically, I should point out that you've been that person since the moment I knocked on your door asking for sugar I didn't need." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that held all the promise of their future. A future built not on fear or necessity, but on choice, on love, on the decision to face whatever came next together. When they pulled apart, Olivia was laughing through her tears. "Emma's going to lose her mind when we tell her. She's going to want to be the flower girl," Daniel predicted. "Obviously, and your mother's going to want to plan everything." "Also obviously," Daniel agreed. "But first, let's just enjoy this moment. Just us, right here, right now." They stood on the balcony as night fell completely, the city spreading out below them in a blanket of lights. Somewhere in that city were other people in crisis, other doors waiting to be knocked on, other chances for kindness to transform into something more. But right now, in this moment, Daniel and Olivia had everything they needed, each other, a love born from the worst circumstances but grown into something beautiful, and the knowledge that sometimes the most terrifying moments in life become the doorways to the greatest blessings. 2 years later, they stood in the backyard of a small house just outside Portland, watching Emma play with their new puppy while Patricia supervised from a lawn chair. The house had 3 bedrooms, a garage where Daniel could work on cars in his spare time, and a garden where Olivia had planted vegetables with Emma's enthusiastic help. The wedding had been small and perfect, held in the same courthouse where Marcus had been sentenced, reclaiming that space with joy instead of trauma. Emma had indeed been the flower girl, taking her duties so seriously that she'd insisted on practicing walking down the aisle for weeks beforehand. Patricia had cried through the entire ceremony, and Olivia's parents had welcomed Daniel and Emma into their family with the same fierce protectiveness they'd always shown their daughter. Marcus was serving his sentence in a prison 3 states away, and Olivia rarely thought about him anymore. When she did, it was with a sense of detachment rather than fear. He'd been a chapter in her life, a painful one, but not the defining one. The defining chapter was this: the life she'd built with Daniel and Emma, the family they'd become, the home they'd created together. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "About that night," Olivia said, leaning back against him. "About knocking on your door at midnight asking for sugar. About how terrified I was, how certain I was that I'd never feel safe again." "And now?" Daniel asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Now I feel safer than I ever have," Olivia said, turning in his arms to face him. "Because I learned that safety isn't about hiding from the world or avoiding risk. It's about having people around you who choose to show up, who choose to care, who choose to open the door even when it would be easier to keep it closed." From across the yard, Emma called out, "Olivia, Dad, come see what Biscuit learned." They walked hand in hand toward their daughter, toward the life they'd built from the ashes of crisis, toward a future that held nothing but promise. And as Daniel watched Olivia laugh at the puppy's antics, watched Emma grab her hand to show her something important, he thought about his father's words from all those years ago. When you see someone who needs help, you don't calculate the cost against the inconvenience. You just help. He'd helped. And in doing so, he'd found everything he didn't even know he was missing. Behind them, the small house stood warm and welcoming in the evening light, its windows glowing yellow against the deepening sky. Inside those walls lived all the evidence anyone could need that love could grow from fear, that family could be built from crisis, and that sometimes the most important thing you could ever do was open your door to someone asking for sugar they didn't really need.